It's just, you Center City, all the lower dates.
Hey, you never know how to do. Thank you. How are you?
I love that reading. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much. Well, you don't have steps. Check them out on video, so they'll get out. Yeah. But in seeing his family doctor today to get the name of the psychiatrist, and when you specialize in rehab for the next day, you see the knee specialist in that region, because that's what works, so you hit her. Still beautiful. It's
Michael has something. He was very excited.
yeah.
But
I see her having good, nice to meet you. Yes. Please sign in and take the information sheets that are out there. Great up.
you've been welcome to do anything. Forward related.
Oh, yeah. This is all made way too complicated than it needs to be. Oh, yeah.
Here to get it set up, whatever it requires, so.
Perfect. Seriously, we gotta think about this thing. It's almost like, quarter inch molded would do it.
Well, I was trying to figure out if there's a way. I need to take.
The angle,
Here.
oh. I put it up here. Or. Just seems so odd that it didn't come that way.
I agree, but I think I can fix it.
Okay,
Not in the next 3 minutes, but I think I can fix it.
by next week.
Okay, that's.
Hey, go down the steps Wednesday. Luckily didn't hurt himself. But yeah, we're seeing at the street today, it started with the beam of the side. And then you see the new special next to be both though. Oh, yeah, you saw the man specialized in knees. Yeah. Oh my goodness, tardiness. Tardiness. I have close to 50 people signed up. Where are they? I know.
It's not like that, I want to get into though. I was nervous.
John Wall,
Yes.
will we have the people on Skype or whatever the hell it is we do? Are we gonna see those people? We don't need to see them.
We don't need to see them. They currently have the ability to unmute and talk if, there's an interactive portion. But there's no real need to see them at the moment.
All right, guys, we're gonna start. Everyone signed in?
Yes.
Sign in. You need both forms. You need to put your name on each form. So that's your form to take away with you. Okay, you need to identify everyone's property here. All right. I can't begin to tell you the importance of understanding the agreement of sale. Why do you feel you need to sign in, sweetheart, and grab two forms? Why do you feel there's such a great importance of understanding the agreement of sale? It's a binding contract. Fascinating. Any other thoughts on why it's so important to understand this?
If we don't. For clients go to you, they can provide it. It's your responsibility to explain to your clients what we did. If you don't want to leave.
Excellent. You also need to know where to find the answer to circumstances. When something goes left, you have to know where to look to find it. Now, that second packet is what I call the Bible. The agreement of sale actually has an explanation to it. Okay? Most people don't know that. So now you have a resource to go look at for things, okay? To get a better understanding. I can't tell you how many of these I see in any given week from different brokerages, agents in our company. I hang my head in shame way too many times. This is so important. You have to do it right. Lazy is the second name for realtors. They are lazy people. I want other brokerages to say, oh, I just got an offer from Keller Williams, Philadelphia. Thank God. Rather than, oh, Christmas trees. I just got an offer from Keller Williams, Philadelphia. Let's see how bad this one looks. How embarrassing. You don't want to be embarrassed. Okay? Now, it is not mandated. But I will tell you, it has a better look. Stop making decisions for yourselves. You're not good enough to do that yet. So listen to what somebody is telling you, take it for what it is, and move forward with it. This should be done in capital letters only. Now, I go back in time really far. Longer I've had license than the majority of you have been on this earth. With that said, there was a time when it was mandated that the agreement of sale was done in capital letters. It's a better look. When I review from another brokerage and I see something in all capitals, the first thing I look is to see who the agent is. 60% of the time it was one of my students, somewhere in my lifetime. Okay, let's start with, it needs to be done in capital letters. Now, the importance of identifying who the buyer is and their mailing address. Here you go. Why do we need a mailing address for the buyer? Why do we need that?
The mail the deed or something.
Nope. No clue. Okay. Every space on this form has a reason to be there. It's not just to fill the paper. Let's go back in time. I got here in 15 with a different brokerage, different owner. I believe it was 16 the following year. One of our agents passed away. Very young agent in his 30s. Weak. He was weak. In keeping his forms. My job was to try to figure this out. We couldn't unlock his cell phone and we couldn't get into his email. I'm left with, I don't know what. He had listings, but I can't find anybody. Why? Because every piece of paper he had, which was minimal, had no identifying markers. Of all he had, I found one person who had a Greek last name this long. We Googled, found two in the Delaware Valley, took a shot and called one, and asked if he was in a contract for a sale of a property. Because yeah, how'd you know? Well, because Google helped me find you. That is one of the most important reasons why we need addresses. If the broker, remember, these listings are not yours. No. Everybody thinks this is mine, fabulous. No, it's not yours. You're a key piece of this. All of these belong to the brokerage. And if we gotta go find somebody, tell me, how am I finding somebody? Every address needs to be filled out. I'm weary, I'm tired, I'm disgusted. If anyone hasn't noticed the tone of my voice, let me help you out here. Okay, I'm tired of looking, seeking, hiring PIs to go find people. Like enough. Every blank needs to be filled out. Same thing on the seller. Why is it important that the seller's address be added?
People read this, everybody know.
Because the property being sold is not necessarily where they live. And we gotta find that when God forbid something happens. So this needs to be filled out in its entirety. Now we start. Address of the property, 123 Main Street. In the municipality of. You accidentally found yourself in the suburbs. And you accidentally are putting in an offer on something. You don't even know where to look. You go into public record, and public record will help you out. It'll say, this is the municipality of blank. So now you know, right? You can find out where it belongs. The school district. The school district was added to the agreement of sale about 15 years ago. Reason being, buyers were purchasing property for the school district. To find out, they fell in love with the house that didn't belong in that district. It's now been made part of the agreement, so everybody knows what they're looking at. You need to know the exact school district. Public records will give you that information. Zip code, added about 15 years ago. And the county of which this municipality resides. Now, most people don't know this, so let me share. The city of Philadelphia is the only city in the country that it is its own county. Okay, so in a Philadelphia property, it's the municipality. Vicki writes City of Philadelphia. County of Philadelphia. Okay, so it's important we get this straight. Tax ID number. Where do you find the tax ID number? Public records, okay? Now, in regards to lot, block, deed book, and etc., or parcel number, they too were found in public records, but they would be your suburbs. You could put it in either spot, tax ID and or the parcel type of thing in there, but you're going to find that in public records, the numbers. Okay? We all understand those first two sections, yes? Yes.
Municipalities, the city of Philadelphia.
That's what I put if the property is in Philadelphia. Yep. Okay. Now we have identifying who's on for, yeah, baby.
Sorry, for the identification with the parcel lot, et cetera, that's often left blank. What are your thoughts on that?
That's fine.
That's okay, if you're filling the tax ID, that's
Correct.
not, okay.
Lot and block is often done like in Jersey, even though this is a Pennsy thing, that's how they identify lot and block. Okay, next is identifying who's on first and what's on second. Who's representing who? There is a small rectangular block here. And it says, no business relationship. Buyer is not represented by broker. When might that small little box be checked off?
So if,
I'm sorry,
if,
well, not on the buy side, okay? It's on the sell side, so let's think about the buy side.
The buyer is agent.
Correct, when the buyer is an agent themselves, what else? Hmm. I don't see that happening too often when a bank is buying property.
If you're just publishing as a transaction.
The buyer is not represented.
Correct, so what circumstances are that, and I need you to repeat what you just said.
If you as an agent are functioning as a transaction agent for the buyer.
Do we do transactional licensee at Keller Williams Philadelphia?
No.
No. So that answers that. Okay. An attorney is fabulous and has made a decision, he or she does not need representation. A real estate agent representing themselves, not recommended. Someone who saw an infomercial at 2:30 at night, and I mean, how hard can this be, real estate, and has decided that they want to represent themselves. They are the caveats that may allow that little check mark to go checked. Who is the broker or the brokerage that is representing the buyer when there is going to be representation is the next question. So for us, it's Keller Williams Philadelphia. You're spelling out the word Philadelphia. There is another brokerage, Keller Williams Philly. Can't tell you how many attorneys can get that straight, and I'm getting legal papers for the wrong brokerage. Let's spell it out. Company ID number, I want you to write this in. This is going to be your reference all the time. You're going to keep this paper. Write on it. Our license number is R as in Ralph, B as in boy, 068858. Address 1619 Walnut Street, 4th floor, Philadelphia, PA 19103. Stop being lazy. Office number 215-627-3500. Just remind me. Fax number. Fax? 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 If you accidentally get involved with a bank, email. Oh, don't you look like an ass? The bank says, excuse me, may I have your fax number? I'll get back to you now. 215-627-6525. Now, who is the licensee? Let's pretend it's us, we're on the buy side. So it's Vicki Carey. And then what is Vicki Carey's license number? You all have in your wallet, you better be nodding vertically, your little wallet size license, right?
Yeah.
Right. When in doubt, pull it out, okay? Let's look and see what goes in here. Very few of us have a direct number, we all have a cell phone number. Make sure your cell phone number is in there. And what your email address is, so others can find you. Now, let me ask a question first. Because I know realtors, nobody bothers to read anything. What were you supposed to bring today with you? Who does not have a highlighter?
Thank you so much.
All of you, you're getting whacked.
Vicki, she is on.
You have it?
You're a good girl.
Because I'm gonna now have you do things, and then girlfriend does. That's why I don't get a towel. Here's one. Shame on all of you. Am I getting a nerve? Am I getting a nerve? How you're not following through. You're not reading what you need to read. All right. Now, this is the tricky part that a lot of people get confused with. On the buyer relationship with a PA broker, on the left-hand side, you have options. Buyer agent, broker represents buyer only, or are we a dual agent in this transaction? Thank you. First off, depends, correct. First off, who can tell me what dual agency is?
We represent both sellers and selling the buyer.
Is it you or is it the broker? Remember, you're not important. I don't know why you people think you're so valuable. Okay? If the brokerage has the listing, so the question is, on the buyer side, does Keller Williams Philadelphia have this listing? And we're going to say for argument today, the answer is no. We are not the listing office, yes.
While we're on this class, I'm actually putting in my call for now. And I noticed that this capital letters for everything, even for my income. Still writing capital.
I often do not put that in capital, but it's optional. I usually do not. I use the lowercase.
Okay, and then everything else.
Yes.
Thank you.
So if we are not holding the listing, we are not the brokerage who has that contract. We're going to check off buyer agent. Broker, hello, is representing the buyer only. Now on the right side, we have three options here. We have buyer agent, all company licensees represent the buyer. We have buyer agent with designated agency. Only licensee named above represents the buyer. And then we have an option for dual agency. But in this conversation, we've opted out of the dual agency. So which of the first two boxes are we checking off? Designated agency. Now, scary as this is, there are many agents who could not tell me if I asked, what is designated agency? When you meet a client and you're working with the consumer notice as your very first document, there's the answer to your question. It gives explanations of the, first off, how many forms of representation is there in the state of Pennsylvania regarding real estate transactions? Now, listen to what I said. How many forms of representation are there in the state of Pennsylvania regarding real estate transactions? Think if you're a consumer notice.
Oh,
5. Very good. Buyer agency, seller agency, dual agency, designated agency, transactional licensing, which we do not participate in. Stop doing it.
When would you ever be, like, when would it be time to actually check it off for the first time?
We do not practice that here. So you're done. 2 is your option. Okay, second one. So you, and not every one of you is representing the buyer, right? Okay. Now, at the very bottom of this rectangular block, transactional licensee, broker and licensee provide real estate services but do not represent buyer. No. You have a good friend. You're helping somebody out. I get it. Family member is selling. You know, it was that Thanksgiving dinner. The empty seat grandma only guessed away a few months ago. And we're talking about her stuffing was always better than everybody else's. It was an emotional moment. One of the nieces is sitting next to Uncle Joe, who happens to be the executor of the estate. And she turns to Uncle Joe and she says, Uncle Joe, I always love grandma. Because you know, you gotta sell it. Oh my God, you know, you just. Why don't you buy it, honey? You can sell it. Little Joe, I haven't bought it yet. I can only do this. Uncle Joe, yeah, we're passing the apple pie. We're excited because she's gonna live in grandma's house. Like, come up with a number and, you know, she's gotta get a mortgage and all this, listen. I gotta break your stones, let's just figure out how much it's worth and we'll do that. Everybody's excited. All they need is somebody to shuffle the paper, right? You can assist that scenario, but you've got to pick somebody. Pick to be on the sell side or pick to be on the buy side, leaving the opposite side to their own discretion. But pick something. It's way too convoluted, way too dangerous. Out there flopping in the wind when there's no representation. Okay.
I'm sorry, are you saying don't do the ladies?
That's
What are you saying?
because they're not looking to pay an agent. But you're like, all you need is paperwork shuffled back and forth. I can help you, but on the contract, I have to represent somebody. So I'm gonna represent the niece and not the estate. Okay. All right, the next section is a mirror of the first section. And this next section talks about seller's relationship with a licensed broker.
Vicki, sorry, just to go back a second, when you were talking about the licensee name and you said your name, but then you said our license card, our license number. So that's correct, so it's your name, but my license number? Okay, so what's the state? What's the name?
Whoever the agent is, I just threw out my name.
Okay,
Yeah.
Just wanted to-
Yeah, that's okay. Okay, so here we go again. There is that little box, no business relationship, seller is not represented by a broker. Give me some scenarios. When might we check that off? BizBo, which is slang for what? For sale by owner. Next, who else could be representing the seller? An attorney. And who else? A real estate agent. Now. Let's make this very clear. At Keller Williams, Philadelphia. It is frowned upon. You representing yourself as a seller in your own property. Investment, private residence, it's frowned upon. Why do you think it's frowned upon?
Too much emotional attachment to the property and interests, to the financial interests in the property.
Okay, anybody else? How about
What's that affect, you know?
E&O's a risk, though it does, you're covered. As a company covering you, but I'm talking about KW policy. Okay, the policy is you don't do this. It is way too convoluted. Way too convoluted. Too many issues. You knew and didn't disclose. Because you knew enough to know. Remember, the Commonwealth's goal here all the time is how does Joe Public see us as agents? We as agents have a duty because we all belong to the board. Do you ever see a business card? Somebody comes through and hands you their business card on a listing, and underneath it says salesperson. What does that mean? What does it mean when the business card says salesperson?
They're not.
Correct. They are not realtors. They are salespeople. As a realtor, so you get that full call. You have a much higher standard, code of ethics. We had a litigation with an office that didn't belong to any board. You know how that worked out for us? Not so good. They closed the company. Not only did they close the company, and our agent happened to have legal representation on their own. We tapped into their business account logistically, and they emptied the account. They knew exactly what they were doing. We then went to take whatever personal channels they had in the company, and they got rid of all the desks, the chairs, the phones, the filing cabinets. They got rid of it. Try not to work with these people who are not realtors. It's a big problem. Really is. Okay, now we're going to fill out identical down here. Who the brokerage is that represents the seller, their license number, their full address, stop being lazy, their fax and phone. All of this information right here is where? Present.
Right.
And print out, fill a tree, print out, and I'll tell you another reason why you're doing this. Kill a tree, print out that first 2 pages in bright.
No, if it's not in Gray, where can you find it? Because I've definitely come across some brokers that don't have a license number in Gray.
There's a telephone. Yeah, you can call up there. You can also find it right when you go to the search bar, you search. Agent, click, opens up, you put in their name, bada bing, bada boom.
Right, no, I know that. Sometimes the actual brokerage doesn't have their spot, but you're right.
Yeah. Pick up the telephone. We used to use that a lot years ago. Alright. Now here we go. On the sell side, is the seller agent, the broker only representing the seller, or is it a dual house? Remember, in-house is dual house. Anything in-house makes it dual to everybody. The other reason I'm going to tell you, those of you who took the effort to show up at our last team meeting when I was up here ranting and raving for 20-some minutes, in regards to that infinitesimal questionable notice from Bright that you may not be getting paid by the seller. When you turn in an offer, include in your paperwork the printout from Bright that day. See, you can go into Bright as a listing agent and make changes. So they close it out, they sign and execute the agreement, and then they go from 2.5 to 2. Because they're not nice people. You have proof, because you cannot go back in time and write. You have proof. On the date, when you printed it out, it prints out the date on the top left. That at that very moment, when I turned this in, including the Bright form, you were offering co-ops 2.5%. Include that. See, we're going to be smarter than the average bear, okay? We're going to know, we're going to be one step ahead of those who think they're so clever. Alright. Licensee's name, their license number, their cell number, and again, when in doubt, you don't know how the other side is represented. You don't know, right? Always go with designated agents. All large brokerages as a company do designated agency. Now, there is another form of agency that goes way back in time. Does anybody know how we used to practice real estate 35 years ago when a buyer would come in the office to see a property? Sub-agency. Yeah, can anybody tell me what sub-agency is?
Technically work with the seller.
That's right, you technically work for the seller. And you can work it. Doesn't make any sense. I was sitting floor time, they walked in, they saw our sign on Maple Avenue, they wanted to go see that little Cape Cod. I said, okay, so I called up, it's vacant, no problem, lockbox, I dragged their Juba over there 35 years ago. We look at it, they love it, they say, let's write this up. There was no seller's disclosure, there was no late-based payment. There was maybe a pre-approval. Maybe a pre-approval. So you go, you're a little bit better than most of the agents 35 years ago. And you go, listen, I need you to sit with our in-house loan guy. So you call the loan guy, comes in, or he comes up from behind the desk and talks to them and makes a few notes and comes back and he gives you their goods. All right, cool. So you write it. Interesting. We write it up. We do home inspections, we're just kind of we just started. And there was a couple of issues, we got limited income. So there were a couple of things we needed to address. I say to the buyer, listen, we're gonna write up a couple of things that we need to see if we can get the seller to fix it. Okay. So we write up a little wish list, we send it to the sellers, and right away the estate's like, hey, I'm not doing anything. And you guys, no. Pounding on the counter, no, this is bad, this is a safety issue, this is this, and you get 2 out of the 3 things you wanted. You were very proud of yourself. That buyer said, like, Vicki was in my morning. You get all the way to the closing. Uncle Joe's there. The buyers are engaged. We're also just nice conversation. Things are going along. Neighbors are going back and forth. People are starting. There's a bottle of champagne. Uncle Joe leaves with a small tear in his eye and his mom. The entire 90 days, that's how long it took to close the property. That entire 90 days, Vicki represented the seller because it was sub-agency. Yeah, the buyer really thought he was in your corner. She's here with inspections. Sub-agency represents the seller. That allusion to the buyer, as buyer agency comes from left to right, it goes from the west coast to the east coast. Once it came over here, we were like, that really makes sense. We really need to know where the line is in the sand, who represents who. There are real estate companies today who still practice sub-agency. Seems almost impossible to believe, but they're allowed. You just need to understand what it is. Understand the reasoning, and that falls right into our buyer agency contract. Okay, but that's a whole nother. All right, so on the bottom here, it does talk about dual and or designated agency. So it gives another reiteration of what those 2 forms of identification are, okay? Though you've already talked to your client with the consumer notice and described the 5 forms of representation anytime anyone enters a real estate transaction in the state of Pennsylvania. Any questions on page 1? Page 2. This happens all the time. Title, attorney, other company involved on the sell side. Something goes sideways and the question is asked. What is the date on the agreement of sale? What is the date of the agreement of sale? Yeah,
This evening, I saw our paperwork.
that is correct. The date you filled out the paperwork. There may be 3 offers by the same buyer on the same property. Buyer was insulted, excuse me, seller was insulted by the first offer. Never would I sell it that. They come back 2 weeks later with a small adjustment. They've had no other sellers, had no other people. No, counters. The third time around, a month and a half later, we bring another offer. Buyer brings another offer to the same seller for the same property. Question is, which of these contracts are we talking about? Whenever the question is asked, and it's asked on addendums, that's why you need to know this. Addendum state, agreement of date. Date of the agreement is not execution. It is the day you typed it up. Okay? Purchase price. Now, because we use forms such as .loop and .docusign, they will do this for you. You will start, and please note that the very first line has a dollar sign, which is opposite to what it used to be many, many years ago. You now put in numerically what the offer is. 350,000, 350.00. We have no cents, such as dollar and cents, no cents in the agreement of sale. It's not $350.28. There are no cents, yes.
I have a question about, you're right, how you said the date typed up should be the date. What if like you're just preparing it a day early and your buyer knows you prepared it and you looked at it, should that still be the date or should you wait until they sign it and then you're ready to hand it over to the buyer?
You can prepare a day early, it's okay. Okay, it's identifying the contract by date of preparation, okay? So now we have 350,000, we know what that is. The next line, which would be line 5, is going to give us in verbiage 350,000. Those words have to be typed in. Okay. Initial deposit. Within 5 days of not specified of the execution date. So since it comes up so early, what is the execution date? What does that mean? Yep.
The date the buyer and seller agree to the contract.
Close.
The seller's going to give also
Who signs first, all contracts?
buyer.
So seller signs last. Execution date. It's the last time, theoretically, a pen went to that paper. The last time initial was done and or signature. We have made alterations to contracts by changing a term by initials. Yeah, we crossed it out and we've initialed it. With every initial comes a date. Because that date, the last time the pen touched the paper, is now our execution date. Okay. Okay. So, initial deposit, 5 days. Now, it used to be long ago, far away, that when you wrote an offer, attached, you stapled. Good faith deposit, that's what we used to call it, good faith deposit. To show that you were really interested in this. You can execute an agreement of sale without monies. You don't have to have money down to execute an agreement of sale. So think about that line right here. Line 7. If not specified 5 days from the execution date. Well, the execution date is we made that contract live on that day. That's when we blew life into this. That date. Oh, consideration of money. Now here, we use money. No goats, no sheep, no nothing, right? We use money. We have an execution date, but we will then have consideration to come later. So you can have an active contract without consideration. A seller can agree to the terms of the contract and take no deposit.
So I have a question regarding the listing side, so once the AOS is executed. Is that listing supposed to be changed, like the status before the deposit is received, so it's active if it was active under contract or anything? Is that supposed to happen as soon as the AOS is executed?
Does anybody cross this road before and had a conversation with Bright?
So you have it follow.
Within 2 days of the executed agreement, Bright says you have to identify the status of the property. There are only 2 choices today: active with contract or pending. Had an issue with someone in our company only a month ago, who was quite sure they were veterans. It had been under contract for like 30 days. We represented the seller. Why the buyer agent didn't lose their mind is beyond me, because I ended up with them on the phone. They were very professional, very nice, but I was like. So I reached out to the agent and said, why is this TO? Why is this property TO? Oh, because the seller did not want me to make this pending. Why do we seem to feel that the seller has anything to say about this? We, Keller Williams Philadelphia, have a contract with whom? Oh, right. And that contract that we have with Bright indicates here are our rules and you will abide. It doesn't matter what the seller says. The seller is not in a contractual relationship with the MLS. I said, don't matter, we gotta change it. I got hung up on it. And next thing I know, the phone rings and it's the seller. Miss Carey. Yes. And when ranting and raving, how did I even find out about this? Because the buyer agent came to me and said, I got a problem. Individual, not origin from the United States, from abroad. And said, I want to show this lovely home that I'm buying to my friends and family, but I can't. Because Google, Zillow, all these other fabulous things have it off the market because it was TO. That's how all this started. And he goes, I can't forward it. So well, give me a minute, let me figure out. This minute turned into 3 days. Seller calls me ranting and raving. You were influenced by the buyer, and I said, you need to stop talking. It's clearly you don't know. I'm not influenced easily. I don't want it. I said, there used to be an option in the MLS, active no-show. Let me go back and find out about that. If there's an active no-show, we'll alter the TO to that. I called Bright goes, nah. They got rid of that. You have 2 choices, active no showing. Oh, active under contract and pending. So I go back and I said, I'm sorry, sir. That's our only option. I'm not happy with that. I said, well, sorry to say, but that's what we got to do, so I will be changing this. He hangs up and immediately hangs up, I look, there he is again. I dial me. I pick it up, I go, hello, he goes, listen. I'm gonna get my attorney involved, I said, you do you, boo. You do you, boo. Did anybody hear from that attorney? No. No. I went in and changed it from TO to pending. The next day, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I went in, there it was, TO again. She's wonderful, you have to understand. I called Bright, it just so happened, the luck of the Irish. I got a supervisor on the phone. He's like, wait a minute, what are you telling me? You had conversation, you converted it to pending and is now TO because she went in and did it? I said, mm-hmm. He said, you're in charge. He's like, allow me. He went in, he changed it to pending, and there were all these notations that when this fabulous called, that she has no rights to touch this or alternate this without my permission. Now, you have 2 days, deposit in or not, to make these alterations. Make sure you're doing this, okay?
Can I ask a follow-up with that, if, having that issue with the listing agent, that they're not changing it, even though I reached out to them and asked them to do that. I have you CC'd on an email with them to their broker, or just with them saying, you know.
Well, sometimes you could bypass all that and just call her
Okay,
and let them be the bad guy.
okay,
Love
okay.
it, keep you out.
What is the difference between
Pending, some people feel, personally, I go right to pending. I can't be bothered with this acting contract. Because sometimes the question is, are they allowing other buyers to come through? So you can get better clarification from Bright, which they have a whole breakdown of an explanation. Right in, Bright, if you click on active with contract, what it says it is, same thing with Bright, pending. I go directly to pending, I don't have time to fool around. So it's either you can allow people to come in or not, go ahead.
It's pretty basic, but I don't think I actually know the correct answer. When's the first day that you should count? The day of execution or the next day?
Okay, we will come to that and then we'll review that. Okay. Next is, will there be an additional deposit? That was something we did many years ago. You don't see that too often anymore, but if need be, there will be an additional deposit in X amount of days from when? The execution date. We've all established what an execution date is. Remaining balance will be paid at settlement. Let's go back in time. When we go back in time, there actually was a line where the agent would subtract the deposit from the purchase price. And because realtors can't do that, they removed it. I can't tell you what the issue was. It was over and over and over. The math was wrong. It's 350, we're putting 10,000 down. That means the balance is 340. You should get this crazy expenses. And finally, Commonwealth said, I don't know what to do, let's eliminate it. So it actually was removed. And just that sentence, remaining balance will be paid at settlement, whatever that balance happens to be. We're just gonna pay it at settlement, okay? All right. Now, in bold letters, all funds paid by buyer, including deposits, will be paid by check, cashier's check, or wired funds. All funds paid by the buyer within 30 days of settlement, including funds paid at settlement, will be by cashier's check or wired funds, but not by personal check. Not by personal check. not by personal check. How many times do we have a quick closing? And a personal check comes in? You can't take it. It's gotta go back, we gotta make 6 phone calls. You dumbass. It says right here, no personal checks. Deposits, regardless of the form of payment, will be paid in US dollars to whom? Broker for the seller, there we go. Unless otherwise stated here. There are a few brokerages that do not hold deposit monies. Redfin is one, and on an occasion, you'll just randomly see a Remax somewhere or somebody somewhere just doesn't do it. And they notify you of that in writing, you see that, okay? Now, when it says here, broker for the seller, unless otherwise stated here, who else could possibly be holding deposit monies? Yeah. Attorney, I'm sorry, broker for the buyer. Got a question. Which is a whole other subject, but let's pretend you represent the buyer and you sold them a FISBO. You sold them that money. Or you representing the buyer, you go into that brokerage's escrow account, absolutely. You don't want Mr. Fisbo. Okay. Who will retain deposits in an escrow account in conforming with all applicable laws and regulations until consummation or termination of the agreement. Only real estate brokers are required to hold deposits in accordance to the rules and regulations of the State Real Estate Commission. Underline that sentence. That is an important sentence. Everybody says, somebody can watch a news commercial. I don't want the brokerage holding my money. I want, and this is on line 18, only real estate brokers are required. I want my title company to hold it. Title companies have learned because they got they learned that they too will follow the same guidelines as the Commonwealth, though they are not obligated. But individual title companies will make their own business decision. So they too will not disperse escrow money without mutual acceptable agreement on a termination form. Attorneys try to be cute occasionally, God bless. And will throw out language that scares people. No, you want mutual acceptable agreement in writing. Even though we as agents have a much stricter guidelines with the Commonwealth, most of the world out there kind of follows that, mutual acceptable. Seller's assist. Now, I'm not sure if it's the wording, seller's assist, but sometimes can be a little like, I don't know what that means. So when I explain seller's assist, I say it's this. It's the seller assisting the buyer. They're going to help them out. How can a seller help a buyer out in this verbiage of seller's assist?
By putting to go to word.
Seller's assist can only be used for closing costs only. If you are asking for a $10,000 seller's assist, and it just so happens that the estimate of closing cost is $8,500. What do we do with that $1,500 overlay there? Someone say return it to the seller? Can be. Or we try to renegotiate it. How about we think outside the box first?
Yeah.
How about we do in conversation knowing that you're gonna ask for seller's assist is to get the estimate of closing costs from who? Who we getting the estimate of closing costs from? The lender. You're not fabulous. Do not try to do this by yourself. Okay, yes, there are programs out there that says you can do this. But there are fees, only the lender's gonna know through their brokerage what they are. You're always gonna be off. Why bother being off? Why don't we be consistent and have the same number that the loan officer is gonna have? Okay? And then you'll say, uh-oh, if I ask for 10, it's gonna be too much. So now you gotta scramble and try to figure out how you're gonna make up that difference. So let's be proactive, let's find out for sure what our estimate of closing cost is. And correlate that with the seller's assist. The seller is going to assist the buyer in only their closing costs, we can do that. Now, there are caveats to paragraph 3. And one is, seller will pay blank. Now, you could come up with a flat number. Or get your pen and start writing what I'm gonna tell you. On a conventional loan, if the buyer is putting 10% or greater down, they can ask up to 6% of the purchase price. Conventional. On a conventional loan, buyers putting less than 10%, they can ask for 3% of the purchase price. FHA. FHA, you can go up to 6% of the purchase price.
I thought that a conventional did it was 20% down, you can go to 9%.
I'm not familiar with that. Now, you might want to check that. Because there might have been something, some program was, but generally speaking, I'm not familiar with that. VA. And I just got a text from a loan officer, which was fascinating. He said, you might, last night, you might want to share this. And it was conventional, FHA, VA, and something else. Yeah, USDA. Guess what? When an offer is denied, 11.5% conventional, 11.4 FHA, but VA was down to 7. For some reason, sellers emotionally get involved with the VA idea and will accept more VA offers than conventional or FHA. I thought that was fascinating. So consult with your loan officer if you have a veteran. And say, would this not possibly be advantageous for them to go the VA route? Now, there are caveats to VA, and one is your seller's assist, I think is only 4% on VA. But please confirm that with your loan officer. So there are variables. You need to know the variables. You need to have a best friend with your loan officer. Your loan officer is your buddy. Your loan officer's been in the business longer than you have, generally speaking, and has done many transactions while in comparison to yours. He's got 7 in the pipeline while he's talking to you. He or she is that much further along than you are of the knowledge of this. Make them your best friend. Talk to them. You guys have got to work as a team together. Okay? Or it says here, so we're either going to put a dollar amount or you're going to put a percentage of the purchase price. If not specified, it's going to be 0 towards buyer's cost. That's it. Underline that. As permitted by the mortgage lender, if any, Seller is only obligated to pay up to the amount or percentage which is approved from the mortgage lender. Settlement and possession. Settlement date is blank. Or before. Now, don't get caught with your pants down. See that or before? If you have an opportunity to move your closing date up. It already says on before, it's fine. People are involved in a transaction. Think about it. Buyer, maybe two. Seller, maybe two. Loan officer, title company, appraiser. How many people are we going for here? Listing agent, buying agent, we got 8 to 10 people depending on the circumstances. You think anybody could possibly miss an email about this, just possibly? And we're all at the table minus one important person or 2 important people. Type out an addendum, even though your DUPA is covered, because it says on or before, type an addendum that everybody has to sign and they now have knowledge. Okay. Yeah.
Just, I feel the spirit of like possessing me, telling you to say this. If you are planning on moving up your settlement date, and you're working with the transaction manager or an admin or an assistant, please check in with that, because there may be things that cannot happen if you move up the settlement date. You may be waiting on. And you may be waiting on taxes, you may be waiting for things that are not top of mind for you or with the other agent, but your operations people be able to tell you, no, there's no way to go to close on that day.
Excellent.
Or you tell your buyer or seller, oh, we'll close a week early.
Do your due diligence. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Settlement will occur in the county where the property is located, or in an adjacent county during normal business hours unless buyer and seller agree otherwise. I can't begin to tell you how many times I get a crier on the phone. What's the matter, honey? I sold this house in Poconos, totally by accident. I represent the buyer and I want to close on Walnut Street. How many counties is it from Philadelphia County to Lehigh County? How many counties is it? 3? No. No. Underline this. If you accidentally do something out of the immediate, what counties surround Philadelphia? Jasper's close enough. That's a whole different animal. Well, Camden, yeah, but where's the property located? No, they have to come over, that's a whole different state. That's not a county, that's a different state. Different state. Nope. Get in the car, pay the $5, come here. Okay, moving on. Now, this is very important, paragraph C. I can't tell you how many times this gets screwed up. And it reads, at time of settlement, the following will be prorated on a daily basis between the buyer and seller, reimbursing where applicable, current taxes, rent. I want you to square the word rent off, because you have to pay attention to that word. Interest on mortgage assumptions, condominium fees, and homeowner association fees, water and or sewer fees, together with any other lienable municipal service fee in the city of Philadelphia. What 2 municipal services are lienable? Water and gas. Is electric? No. If you've got to skip a payment because you got a tight month, skip your electric bill. Okay. All charges will be prorated for the periods covered. Here's another one, I want you to underline this as well as highlight it. Seller will pay up to and including the day of settlement, and buyer will pay all days following settlement unless otherwise stated here. You're gonna come up with some seller who is again up at night, not sleeping, watching infomercials. Will look at the CD and Alta and say, I'm not paying today, I'm closing. Real calm, real easy. You now know exactly where the answer is to that question. D, for the purposes of prorating real estate taxes for the periods covered are as follows. Now, what I will tell you is you are not experienced enough to do this. When you're doing an estimate of closing costs for your seller, because on the buy side, unless it's cash, you're getting that from the loan officer. We're not doing the minutia here. We are not figuring out the proration of what they're getting back on taxes. Allow only the title company to do that. That would only be a bonus for the seller anyway. Let's not get involved. Municipal tax bills and all counties and municipalities in Pennsylvania are from the period of January 1st to December 1st. So all tax bills for the entire state are calculated from January 1 to December the 31st. School taxes, on the other hand, play differently. School tax bills for Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Scranton school districts are from a period of January the 1st to December the 31st. Those of you who have properties and no mortgage on them, you get a tax bill from the city. Do you get a separate school tax bill from the city? Yeah. Now, there is a school fee, little school thing that they get a couple $100 for you for, which I have no idea what that is. I just pay it to make it go away. But no, you don't get a separate tax bill for Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Scranton. Our bill for real estate includes the school tax. But Pennsylvania has more than those three cities. And therefore it then says, school tax bill for all other school districts are for a period of January the 1st to June the 30th. Don't do the math. Let the title company handle that. Okay, that's their job. Conveyancing of seller will be fee simple deed or special warrant deed unless otherwise stated here. Somebody says to you, we had this happen one time. Guy said to me, I couldn't believe this was happening to me. About close to 20 years ago. It's the day of closing. I represent the buyer. I get a phone call from the listing agent. Nervous now. Vic, this is Jack. I'm like, Jack, okay, what's up? He goes, listen, we got a problem, real big problem. I said, Jack, what's the matter? He goes, the seller was arrested for drugs last night. I said, what? We're closing at 10. This is not. What are you talking about? He goes, yes. I was like, mother of divine grace. I'm like, all right, what are we doing? I don't know what we're doing. I gotta call you back. I gotta try to figure this out. Okay, you gotta try to figure this out. So I go over to the title company at a different brokerage where I was. And I said, listen, I got a problem. I just got a phone call and the seller is in the remedies. First words out of the mouth was this. What's he in for? I said, I don't know. You can ask for some drugs. They went, no, we will not be closing on this property. I go, what? Well, first off, who's signing the altar? Or we just call it the HUD. Who's signing the HUD? Yeah. And guess what? The feds. can take that property as retribution for his actions. Now my buyer's out there hanging. I quick called her up, I said, we got a problem. I felt so bad for her. So bad, she's like, well, what am I gonna do? I said, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking, oh, my title company is just overcautious. But I'm gonna be honest, let me pull a couple others. What's he in the roundhouse for? Selling drugs? Oh, no. Call the next one. What's he in the roundhouse for? Selling drugs? Oh, no. Now I realize this is for real. Like nobody's gonna do this. My phone rings. And it's the attorney for the guy in the rings. And he proceeds to talk really, really fast because he didn't know who he was talking to, and he was just gonna tell me that this is not a problem. We don't have to worry about this, because what we're gonna do is we're just gonna do a quick claim deed. And kept talking. I said, sir, who was in his Jaguar doing about 85 on 95. I said, listen, did you have to say a quick claim deed? He goes, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Don't worry about it. It's not gonna be a problem. This is gonna be fine. I said, no. My buyer will not be moving forward on a quick claim deed. Why is that? Because what does it say, Randy? It says here, E, seller will pay by, seller will be by fee simple deed or special warranty. Quick claim deed is not going to cover issues. And now I'm already an educated consumer because I did a little digging and I'm now finding out this ain't working. And he went, oh. He thought I was a dumbass. When that attorney doing 85 or 95 in his Jaguar calls you and you don't know the answer, you go, I'm gonna call you right back. Pick up the telephone and who are you gonna call? That'll work. You could call the title company. You have to call somebody. Don't pretend you're fabulous, because you're not. So don't pretend. You have to the consequences. What do you think consequences could have been if I didn't know enough to know, didn't know enough to know to ask somebody, and I let my buyer sign a quick claim deed? Bad, right? Bad juju. Okay. We move on, and it says, payment of transfer tax will be divided equally between buyer and seller unless otherwise stated here. Now, when you're a listing agent and you get the agreement of sale, here's a novel concept, you have to read it. Because there are those who are quite clever. And they will then put in here something to the effect of buyer will pay all transfer locally for your seller. But if that's not the case, you got to be careful. If a buyer agrees to pay transfer tax of the seller along with theirs, guess what? Talk to your loan officer, because that could be considered as a gift. Therefore, your $10,000 seller's assist has now dwindled by the amount of transfer tax. Oh, snap. Who knew that? Okay. Possession will be delivered by deed, existing keys, and physical possession to what? Vacant property. Swear that off with your pen. Vacant property, free of debris, with all structures room clean at day and time of settlement. I get a phone call. I have a mentee years ago. And she's at the property, which was quasi, like I'm gonna rehab it and then she's gone. So they go in, it was loaded with all kinds of stuff when we put the offer in. They go to do the walkthrough because it's going to be, oh, it says here, room swept clean and vacant. Guess what? It's still quasi a hot mess. Personal property, lumber, doors, refrigerator in the middle of the living room, all this craziness. Calls me on the phone. I said, Beck, everything's still in here. Now I happen to know the listing agent. I said, call the listing agent, have him meet you there immediately. Sure enough, because he's a good guy, I knew he would. He showed up. He goes, okay, this is a problem. Yeah, it's a problem. We didn't close. Because that becomes the responsibility of the buyer to do all that. You have to make sure, many times I have seen on the last page of the agreement of sale, even though it says it quite clearly here. Vacant property free of debris, it'll be reiterated in type form. Property will be free of all personal items. Swept clean, a reiteration of what we already read here, because sometimes people miss that. If seller has identified in writing that the property is subject to a lease. Oh. Wait, let me go back to C. See where I told you to box that word rent? Here's your problem. If you do not tell the title company that this is a rented property and that there is money in security, we're up a creek. Proration and security has to go on the other side of the sheet. There are loan institutions who do not want to see that. And that's a whole nother subject. But you have to notify both the mortgage company along with the title company and give them the leases. Don't tell me as a buyer's agent, you don't have a lease. As we get to the bottom of the page here, we're going to talk about the top form. You must have received the leases, reviewed the leases, and gotten approval from your buyer that they're willing to accept this lease. Because see, this lease says Mrs. Jones on the second floor, who's been there since 1965, pays $250 a month for as long as she lives there. Is that new landlord willing to accept those terms? I don't know. Okay, so now we go back here. Together with security deposits and interest in, if any, a day and time of settlement. So everything is divvied up equally. Seller will not enter into a new lease or extend existing leases for the property without written consent of the buyer. The buyer will acknowledge existing leases by initialing the leases when are we going to do that? At the execution of the agreement, underline that, unless otherwise stated in this agreement. There's a little box and it says tenant occupied property addendum form attached and made part of this agreement. When you are typing up an offer for a property that has a tenant, you must include a top form. Read the top form. Written acceptance of all parties will be on or before blank. In this market we're working now, what kind of time frame are we generally putting in here as buyer agents? 2 days? 1 day?
Same day or next day.
Listing agents are butters. Because who's in control of this market? Sellers. Sellers are in control. So with that said, they listed on Thursday, but we're doing it with the half Saturday and Sunday, just to let you know. But then we've said a little sentence that says the seller has the option at any time to accept any offer. So in your mind, you're like, oh, I hope my offer is good enough, so I'm going to throw it out there. And then a day later, another email comes through and says, you know what, we're going to wait until after the open house. But you had put the next day as a response. And now the open house is 3 days away. What do we do? That's the buyers to protect our offer. This exact thing happened to me this weekend. Exact happened this weekend. I had to get up Sunday morning, because at 2 a.m, I'm like, in bed. Holy mackerel. Did the addendum, extended it to that date of Sunday and sent it over. Because I didn't want my contract to be what? Right, how dare that?
What?
Could be null and void because it was not to the terms. So we take the terms. Always keep in mind, if you keep medicine in mind with real estate, it seems to be an easier way to understand things. Without addendums, contracts die. Addendums do CPR. Keeps it alive. No. Yeah,
I have one question.
yes.
If they turn down your offer, can you resubmit that offer later on and still be kept alive, or should you rewrite it and introduce them a new offer after they already turned down or made?
Okay, so based on that question, our date here of 5A will have expired. So therefore, the contract has died. You have to rewrite it. You just can't throw an addendum in there 3 days later. No, don't worry about it. All right.
When do you do an addendum and when do you have to rewrite it?
If the contract has died because of line 52, we did not get a response on that date, it's dead. So before that date expires, so Sunday I wanted to know, and I'm not gonna know, I had to wait till Monday. I had it Sunday morning, quick, send it out to my buyers and sign this addendum that we're extending on change of term form, line 52, paragraph 5 to this date.
Started putting a time next to that, like 8 p.m. because I find some agents work, I go to bed at 9 and some weren't responding until 11 o'clock or midnight.
Yes,
Because they were just under the, so I started writing a time frame there.
Yep.
just to reel them in.
yep, you can do that. All right, the settlement date and other dates and times defined for the performance of any obligation of this agreement are of the essence and binding. There it is. If we have an expiration date on line 52, it's telling us in the next paragraph that time is of the essence and dates mean something. That is why they're in here. So therefore, it would have expired and not be binding. The execution date, here we go. Again, I'm not clear why this is an issue. The execution date of this agreement is the date when buyer and sellers have indicated full acceptance of this agreement by signing and or initialing it. For purpose of this agreement, the number of days will be counted from the execution date, excluding the day this agreement was executed and including the last day of the period. Bless you. All changes to this agreement should be initialed and dated. Let's pretend. Today is the 12th. My offer is accepted. The seller signs off on the 12th. In the contract, we have decided we are going to do a home inspection. And it will be done within 10 days of the execution date. Based on this scenario, what is my execution date? The 12th. It states here, we do not count the day of execution. God gave us 10 fingers, and I need you to use them. So if today is the 12th of execution and we don't count that, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. We have to have our home inspection done by the 22nd of this month, including but not limited to a wish list at the reply to inspection as a wish list, as we accept the property, or a denial. The 22nd is our drop dead date. Now, that seems easy, right? But now let me throw you a scenario. Today is the 12th, and it is our execution date. We have 10 days to do our inspection, but my buyers are anxious. We have an inspection done on day 5. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. On the 17th, we have our inspection done. We send a wish list with reply to inspection on the 6th day. What day does the seller need to respond to us? Now, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here because we have to then go all the way to inspections. But inspections are customarily identified unless altered 10, 5, and 2. 10 days to do our inspections, 5 days for the reply from the seller, and then another 2 days for our buyer to reply to that. So on that note, 10, 5, and 2, we turned in our paperwork on the 6th day of the 10-day. When does our seller have to respond?
The 55 days after the 22nd.
Yeah, they still get the original, I don't think, say 15.
90.
So everything goes to the end of the contingency period. The end of the buyer's contingency period is the 22nd, even though we turned it in early. At the end of the contingency period on the 22nd, the seller has 5 days to respond. 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. Everything is based off the end of the contingency period. And when we get to that in paragraph 13, I think it is, we will go over this again. I get phone call after phone call after phone call. Perhaps everybody learns differently. It's not a bad idea to keep an old-fashioned calendar. And you write execution day on the 12th and then count 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 22 is my last day for inspection. You write that in the block. And then you go 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. 27, response from seller. 28, 29, buyer's response, if we have not figured out what the hell we're doing at that point. Okay? Time of the essence. Where do buyer agents screw up? Right there. Following the dates, they screw up every single time. Okay. The settlement date is not extended by any of the provisions of this agreement on D, paragraph 5D. And may only be extended by mutual written agreement by all parties. So that means we have to do an addendum. Certain terms and time periods are pre-printed in the agreement as a convenience to the buyer and seller. All pre-printed terms and time periods are negotiable. Underline this. And may be changed by striking out a pre-printed text and inserting different terms acceptable to all parties, except where restricted by law. Where would that except where restricted by law play? Oh, I stumped you. That's going to play into condo docs. With your 5407, okay, so we have 3407s is condo docs, 5407s is homeowners. 4409 is your co-ops. That is when, because they are regulated, law regulated. Let's move on. Zoning. Got a phone call 6 months ago from a team leader. Anybody here a team leader? Alright. Team leaders' responsibilities are to know what their buyer agents are doing at all times. A team leader calls me on a Friday night in an absolute panic, who says to me, I have a screw up. I said, what's the matter? He said, my buyer agent wrote an offer for a triplex. And the appraiser went out and said, this is not a triplex. And since it's not a triplex, I want all of the kitchen cabinets along with the range removed from the first floor apartment. My buyer doesn't want to buy the property anymore because it's not a triplex. So Vicki said, did anybody bother to check the zoning? The answer was no. This team leader, in his mind, in his absolute panic, was going to pay $10,000 to that buyer for the deposit that she was going to lose. He just came to grips with that. I will write the check. I said, really? Give me a minute to think about this. And there was a reason, which I can't recall now, but I was able to get him out of that. And he did not have to pay because it didn't appraise, and we worked off of the denial. I worked it backwards with all the other professionals and got it out and got it done. And she got out of the transaction and they gave back the check. Now, he wanted to kiss the ground I walked on. But the issue here is this. Anybody who thinks they got the wherewithal to have a team, first off, you better know your stuff. This is more than dollar signs having a team. You are responsible for everybody under, and now I'm responsible for you and all your peons underneath you. All right, so this is serious. If you decide to take that route, you better know what you're doing. So zoning is priceless, and let's read this. Because if you're ever dealing with a situation, something other than a single family dwelling, you have to pay attention to this. Failure of this agreement to contain the no zoning classification, except in cases where the property and each parcel thereof, that's a very important statement, if subdividable, is zoned solely and primarily to permit single family dwelling, underline that, highlight that, will render this agreement voidable at buyer's option. And if voided, all deposit monies tendered by the buyer will be returned to the buyer without any requirement of court action. Line 69, zoning classification as set forth in the local zoning ordinance. That line needs to be filled out. If it's anything other than solely or primarily to permit single family dwelling. Do your homework. Yeah.
They also double check the days that make sure that it's the MLS.
Oh, thank you.
MLS.
Thank you. Yes. What is in the MLS? How did the information get in the MLS get there? From the agent. And they're dumbasses. 150% right what he just said. Pay no attention what's written in the MLS. You do your due diligence. You go to the OPA and figure out what is this. Okay? Yes. I'm sorry, sir. Yes.
Even other than residential.
That's correct. Now that's a due diligence period, isn't it? And we have how many days to do our due diligence? Oh, Well, that'll determine in the further paragraphs, we will dive deep in. Because the due diligence period is only one set time unless otherwise stated. So if we've got 10 days to do our inspections and such, you've got 10 days to determine that this is zoned correctly. It is now a due diligence period. You may want to hand write those words in there, due diligence periods for the buyer. Okay?
Just for someone in the chat, can you reiterate where they can go to confirm the zoning?
In phila.gov, you want to go to the OPA. So you can, it indicates zoning, LNI, it has all these breakdowns. You go there to determine the accuracy of what this property is zoned with the city. Now let's pretend we're in the burbs. You can look at public records, but that's only as good as somebody punched it in one day.
Question,
Yeah.
if you waive the zoning. Does that waive this? If you waive the, contingency section,
Right.
does that,
Make that null and void?
yeah,
It could, unless you've identified it's something other than a one-family residential.
okay,
Right, so that's the caveat you're gonna hang your hat on. Anything other than one-family residential. Okay. Pictures of personal property. It is possible for certain items of personal property to be so integrated into a property that it becomes a fixture and will be regarded as part of the property. Go back to school. When you were in real estate school, what was the term used for personal property? Chattel. Thank you very much. So that is what they're speaking here. Something that is a chattel, because though it states it has become so integrated into the property. Question. You walk in the middle bedroom of this beautiful home, 120 years old in Northwood. Beautiful, 2 staircases, mahogany ribboning on the floor. The middle bedrooms, and many of them, that beautiful window is leaded stained glass. Is that integrated into the property? Absolutely. So if that seller wants to exempt that stained glass window, because they're going to take it with them, we need to identify that, because at this very moment, it is part of the property. Okay, good. So it then to say regards as part of the property and therefore included in the sale. Buyer and seller are encouraged to be specific when negotiating what items will include or be excluded. You as a listing agent, you're in the house. Now, I'm going to close my eyes and not look at anybody who raises their hand. Who has told me they listed a property and never walked through it? Keep your hands down, I don't want to know. Okay? When you're sitting in somebody's dining room, you need to walk through this property. Now, you may not wet sign the paperwork, we still may do it electronically, but you have to know what the hell you're signing up for. And you look, and there's this very ornate chandelier that you wouldn't pay $10 in a yard sale for. But just so happened that cost $3,000 35 years ago when the buyers moved in and her dad was a physician and she said, I like it, and dad bought $3,000 35 years ago because this is a blah, 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 blah design. When you have this little twitch in your neck, because you're like, is that son of a gun saying? Open your mouth. You don't have to open your mouth for everything else. Open your mouth and ask, is this chandelier saying? or are you taking this with you? Is that stained glass staying, or are you taking this with you? If they're taking it with you, not a problem, but you gotta know, we have to replace it with something tasteful. Something of the period. Okay. If at all possible, you wanna do that before the property is photographed and or put in the MLS. We don't wanna negotiate over this. Okay? As we go on. Included in the sale. All existing items permanently installed in the property. Free of liens and other items including plumbing, heating, gas fireplace lots. Radiator covers, hardware security systems, thermostats. Can you imagine? People are taking their bagging thermostats. Lighting fixtures, including chandeliers and ceiling fans. You don't have to rewrite in ceiling fans. It's already here. Pools, spas, hot tubs, including covers and cleaning equipment, electrical animal fencing systems, excluding of the collars. Garage door openers and transmitters, mounting brackets and hardware for TVs. Pay attention. 25 years ago, when flat screens came out, and they were the cool, hip, and fun, the seller was taking it with the bracket, and you go to do your walkthrough, and you had a hole. Now, what am I doing with the hole? Became a big issue. That is why this was added. Mounting brackets and hardware of TV and sound equipment are included. Tell your sellers, you can take your flat screen, you must leave the brackets. Unpotted shrubbery. Somebody said to me, what are you talking about of an unpotted shrubbery? That is the Japanese maple on the front lawn. You can't pull it out by the bulb roots and take it with you. Let me tell you, I've had phone calls.
I just had a question about the mouse back. Can the seller just like infill it or like, you know?
No, it says here as a stack. Okay, get your own new bracket. Plantings and trees, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, sump pump, storage sheds, fences, mailboxes, wall-to-wall carpeting. Can you imagine? Wall-to-wall carpeting is at risk of being pulled up and rolled up to go out. Existing window screens, storm windows, screens and doors, window coverings, hardware. This was the other thing, including rods and brackets. The bracket was attached to the home, so it became a fixture, but the rod was a trap. You're kidding. So that's why they had to change it. Shades and blinds, awnings, central back systems with attachments, built-in air conditioners, built-in appliances. We're not taking the wall AC out and leaving a hole. Range ovens, dishwashers, trash compactors, any remaining heating and cooking fuel stored on the property. This actually happened to me. I got a phone call. It was gas, heat, a boiler system. The seller had the oil remaining pumped out 2 days before closing. Can't make it up. Pumped out so that when the buyer went to turn on the heat in December when they were making closing, we couldn't get the heater to work because it was property at time of settlement and if owned, solar panels. Solar panels are a big problem. If you are involved with a property with solar panels, you better get every speck of information about that. Is it leased? Is it owned? What is the consequences? Can it be transferable? Is it transferable? Windmill, interesting. Water treatment systems, propane tanks and satellite dishes. Propane tanks are becoming a lot more prominent. Unless otherwise stated, the following items are included in the sale at no additional cost. What are we adding as the buyer's agent? What are we adding? Washer, dryer, and refrigerator. Okay. They are part of the property or chattels. chattels. Customary in the area that they are included. You better include how many realtors, how many buyer agents have lost their commission to a refrigerator, washer and dryer? Yes. Pay attention. Everybody, haste makes waste. That saying must be 200 years old, but it is so true. Stop trying to be fast. Now, what else might we want to add here?
A line refrigerator.
Yes. A wine refrigerator. Ranges and cookware are mandated in the state of Pennsylvania. You have to have a cooking device for your appraisal. That's why when they lose their mind, because somebody made a conversion of a single family into a multi, they used to say, just take out the range, kind of skirt around it. Now they want the cabinets out, because we can take out the range and just return it 2 days later. Yes.
We'll delay it.
Okay,
We will, I don't know what I'm doing.
so ranges are mandated. You have to have a cooking device. Many years ago, I sold a little tiny 2-bedroom, which is now Wisconsin neighborhood. And it only had a microwave, and I thought, we're never gonna get this passed, and it passed. I think that was a mistake. Only had a microwave, but they considered it a cooking device, so, but note, you need a cooking device. Okay,
Have to be arranged, or no matter, please, my.
yeah, that's why I said this was a mistake. This appraiser did 25 years ago, but you better have, okay. Then it indicates here, okay, what about the swing set? What about the shed? Even though sheds are stated here, you want that shed. So make sure it wasn't an exemption in the MLS, rewrite it in, okay? If there is a pool, you want the equipment for the pool, the covering of the pool, even though it's in here, you want to reiterate kind of things, okay? Items that are going to be exempted, is that chandelier coming out and it didn't come out in time, make sure you exempt it. The stained glass window in the middle bedroom, anything that is questionable that you have confirmation from your seller, I'm taking it. Okay? Make sense? All right, we will go to paragraph 8, our next visit. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? It would take 2 hours to do 2.5 pages of the agreement sale. Yes.
I think I have a question. So section C of paragraph 7, where it says that agreement, the solar panels and females again, it doesn't mention that if there's a financing agreement, contact the provider, there is a building here that automatically related to that, or is that something we would like write in as?
You have to build it in.
Okay.
You have to build it in. Yep. All right, very good. I will see all of these lovely faces next Tuesday. Not vertically. Yes. Yeah.
Basketball,
Is it part of the property or attached?
probably part of the property.
Is it attached to something?
Yeah.
Then it's inclusive.
Well, nowadays, not all of that.
Right.
Once they're pulled around.
The one that rolls around? Yeah.
Yeah.
I want you to go through this, okay? We talked about 2.5 pages, read the explanations in the Bible, okay?
I don't know. Do that. Like.
No, virus findings from here. No. You should have. But So once the buyer has it, prior to the sale, they usually give the, they usually have those. I have to read the time for here, my thought process right here in the end without it. So the buyer has 5 days. to do the applicant's contract, so they go to the time. That says, the seller has 5 days to work. Me too. But you know what? This is the vibe. I can see you talk about it. That was there.
No, she's working in one.
Okay.
Wow.
It's all.
I bought them for, I don't know what reason. Oh, yeah. I didn't want to.
So,
Yeah.
email that.
I'll get it. Yes, again. Machine replaced by our own rules, yeah. And I'm done.
Okay.
And tell her I have no other choice. Right, yeah. I know, but I just need to respond to the attorney.
Oh, I can get it for you. I don't have it, but I can get it for you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. All that. I just have to kind of fill in the space. Okay. Thank you. Bye. Wow, where is everybody?
You scared all of them off.
Yeah.
They were like-
They don't know. Listen,
You're like, I might actually learn something when I come back next week.
who doesn't have a highlighter? Overachiever. Overachiever.
Before we get started, I just want to put it out there for all of you who will not be in the pro coaching class at 12. There is going to be a wealth building mastermind in the conference room right behind us, that Gaurav Gambhir is going to be running. So anyone who is not going to be in pro coaching session is welcome to join us for that. Yeah, of course.
Good morning, sweetheart. All right, guys, let's get rolling here. Yeah, that's a JP question. I know. All right, just for the heck of it, those of you that were here last week, what were your thoughts when you walked out of here? And speak freely. Yes.
I love taking. Yeah, this is like the fourth time, every time.
4 times. See, use your fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4 times this young lady has taken, and why is it 4 times you've taken this class?
Well, one changes, and every time you explain it, it either reminds me of things or I learn new things
Okay.
that I didn't realize. Like I never knew about things I don't do a lot in the suburbs, like last week when you were speaking about things like solar panels and all of that, I would prefer. Needed to consider the notice period for zoning, make sure you write that in, it's not.
It's not uncommon that I have had people take it 3 times for sure. So 4, again, overachiever. Okay. Mortgages. Paragraph 8. Buyer may elect to make this agreement contingent upon obtaining mortgage financing, regardless of any contingency related to this agreement. If buyer chooses to obtain mortgage financing, the following applies. That means we have to pay attention. Buyer will be in default of this agreement if buyer furnishes false information to anyone concerning buyer's finances and employment status. That actually happened to me days before closing, and whose house was I selling? A loan officer's house. The guy had been let go from his job, but figured. Most mortgage lenders do the morning of or the day before verifying of employment. Like they're not kidding, okay? Fail to cooperate in good faith with processing the mortgage loan application, including payment for and ordering of appraisal without delay. Fails to lock an interest rate as stated below, or otherwise causing the lender to reject or refuse to approve or issue a mortgage loan within blank days, 7 if not specified. I will tell you, a good listing agent pays attention to that. Many years ago, I was sitting with a buyer and seller, and we were small talking to realize they were leaving the next day to go on a cruise for 10, 12 days, something crazy. And I was like, what? Oh, no, quick, I had to alter line 98 for days to allow them to be back in the States to do this, right? So within 7 days if not specified from the execution date of the agreement. And what is the execution date? The last date, a pen, I think that, figuratively, a pen has touched this contract, either by initialing and or a signature date. Buyer will make a complete mortgage application, including payment for the ordering of credit reports without delay. For the mortgage team and to mortgage lenders identified in paragraph 8F. When we get to this, I will speak again about it. In that to be determined is not correct. It must be identified what loan institution this buyer is going to work with. To be determined is not the way to do this. Honey, do you need paper?
I just think so.
Okay. Out there, there's, yeah, and we will have a sign-in sheet shortly. If any, otherwise to a reasonable mortgage lender of buyer's choice. Broker for the buyer, if any, otherwise broker for the seller is, put a block around that word, is authorized to communicate with the mortgage lender. I can't tell you how many times I have a listing agent call me and go, am I to pull that loan officer? Well, here it is. And says, yeah, it is authorized to communicate with mortgage lenders to assist in the mortgage loan process. Broker for the seller, if any, is permitted to conduct the mortgage the mortgage lender at any time to determine the status of the mortgage loan application. These are very strong points. Both buyer agent and listing agent are allowed to reach out. And you're gonna get some old biddy, God forgive me for saying that, because I'm old and I'm a biddy. Will jump in your duplex and say, "No, David, I just got a call from the loan officer and he said you reached out to them." And you go, "Yeah. What about it?" You have no right, please, allow me to identify. Please read paragraph 8A2. This paragraph allows me to make these phone calls. Now, you're not being rude and you're not being fresh. You just are a more educated agent, okay? Seller will provide access to insurers, representatives, and, as may be required by a loan lender, to surveyors, municipal officers, appraisers, and inspectors. FYI, you're a listing agent, your seller can't say, "Nobody can come in here." No, that's not how this rolls. If the mortgage lender gives buyer the right to lock in an interest rate at or below the maximum level desired, and we will continue to talk about this as we go further in paragraph 8, buyer will do at least 15 days before settlement. So on paragraph 8A4, all buyers have to lock in within 15 days of going to closing. The loan to value ratio, known as the LTV, again, we will talk more about this as we go further in this paragraph, is used by lenders as one tool to help assess their potential risk of a mortgage loan. A particular loan to value may be necessary to qualify for certain loans, or buyers might be required to pay additional fees if the loan to value exceeds a specific level. The appraised value of the property may be used by lenders to determine the maximum amount of the mortgage loan. The appraised value is determined by an independent appraiser, subject to mortgage lender's underwriting review, and may be higher or lower than the purchase price and or market value of the property. So let's do it, for instance, what is an LTV? Loan to value ratio. If 100% is what we're basing things off, on $100,000 house, easy math, and they're putting 20% down, how much is that in dollars and cents? 20,000. The loan to value is 80%. 80% of the whole is 100, is going to be financed. The LTV is the financed amount in the transaction. Make sense? Now we got this little block. The little block is identified by FHA and VA. If you're writing up a conventional loan, do you have to deal with this box at all, or should you be dealing with this box? No, because it's FHA VA only. It is expressly agreed, and notwithstanding any other provisions of this contract, buyer will not be obligated to complete the purchase of the property described herein, or in accordance of any penalty by forfeiture of earnest money deposit or otherwise, unless buyer has been given, in accordance with HUD, FHA, or VA requirements, a written statement by the Federal Housing Commission, Veterans Administration, or direct endorsed lender setting forth the appraised value of the property of not less than blank. And they give you the answer to blank. The purchase price as stated in the agreement. Blank is how much you are offering for this transaction. They gave you the answer. Buyer will have the privilege and option of proceeding with consummation of the contract without regards to the amount of the appraised evaluation. The appraised evaluation is arrived at the determination, no, to determine the maximum mortgage the Department of Housing and Urban Development will insure. HUD does not warrant the value or the condition of the property. That's important. They're telling you, you still have to get a home inspector. Many years ago, I listed a property and we accepted a VA offer. And at that time, it was very customary to get a second deposit within 10 days. So it's day 9 and I'm like, haven't heard anything about the second deposit. Couldn't get a hold of, somehow I got a hold of the buyer, I can't remember how. And I said, oh honey, A, we need your second deposit, and B, you were going to do your home inspection in 10 days, and I've got nothing about making arrangements for this home inspection. What are you doing? Ah, please. Please, he says to me. It's a VA loan. The VA guy coming out will take care of everything. They will do a much better job than any home inspector will do. I represented who? The seller. So what did I do? Okay. Just tell me when you're bringing in that deposit. Oh, I'll bring it in today. Great. So you hear some chuckling, because if you know what the FHA they're speaking of, when you put in an FHA offer and it's accepted, and or VA, their guidelines are almost identical. When the appraiser comes in, he or she knows it's FHA VA. And they do a very cursory kind of look over. Is the service cable line deteriorating? For those of you who don't know what that is, that'll be our mechanics of the home class. They will look 3 or more steps. Does it have a railing? They will look for peeling, chipping paint, which makes everybody nuts. We can't have any peeling, chipping paint. There are basic guidelines they look for, and that's it. Nobody's taking the front of a breaker box off. They will turn the heat on. You must have heat. You do not need central air. So they don't care about the central air. They do care about the heat. So there are basic things they will look for, which are safety and like humidity. You want to have heat in a house to live in it. So I kept my mouth shut, knowing this poor soul had total incorrect information, but it wasn't my job to tell him, oh honey, you're wrong. Okay. It talks about a warning here that the Department of Housing and Urban Development and Federal Housing Administration transactions provide whoever for the purpose of influencing in any way the actions of such department passes, utters, or publishes any statement knowing the same to be false shall be found under the title of imprisoned more than 2 years or both. So don't lie on anything with FHA VA. That's what they're telling you. It goes. Put your pupa away. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD, notices to purchaser. Buyer acknowledges. 1. Buyer has received the HUD notice for your protection. Get your home inspected. So HUD knows enough to know that that comment that was relayed to me may be something customary that individuals think that FHA is going to do a home inspection. Nay, they're not doing that. Buyer understands the importance of getting an independent home inspection and has thought about this before signing the agreement. Buyer understands that FHA will not perform a home inspection nor guarantees the price or condition of the property. What is the FHA part of a loan? Like, so what is it?
And then it's just essentially like government short mortgage. It's still given by the mortgage broker, but it's backed by government.
Couldn't say it any better, baby, perfect. It's exactly right, the government is backing this loan up in case of defaultment. Okay. Certification, no, buyer will apply for a section of a 203K financing. Anybody know what a 203K is? Correct, construction loan through FHA. Financing in this contract is contingent upon mortgage approval. And buyer's acceptance of additional required repairs as required by the lender. Certification, we the undersigned, seller and buyer party to this transaction, each certified that the terms of this contract for purchase are true to the best of our knowledge and belief. And that any other agreement entered into by any of these parties in connection with this transaction is attached to the agreement. Okay, so we only have to think about this and deal with this when we're doing an FHA transaction. Mortgage contingency. We have a waived and we have elected. This sale is not contingent on mortgage financing. Although buyer may obtain mortgage financing and or the parties may include an appraisal contingency. Buyer and seller understand that the waiver of this contingency does not restrict the buyer's right to obtain mortgage financing for the property. Now, those of you who are out here along with me dancing in this crazy environment, and more crazy if you're working in the burg. I have two buyers in the same price point, thank God, they're looking in different municipalities and counties. One of them is going to be a mortgage transaction, so we always have to go in that, yes, we're obtaining a mortgage. Fortunately, they do not have to add the contingency of the present home they're in now. They're in a financial place where they can carry that, and they're willing to waive that, which is a risk, right? Okay. Now I have my other one. My other one, I said to them, listen, you've got to get rid of your house. This was during the summer. That's one more contingency that we've got tagged on to this. I never recommend waiving that contingency of the sale because none of us come with a crystal ball. But I have to make sure they fully understand what they're doing. So I convinced them, let's unload this house. Unloaded it, no problems, got 15,000 over asking, like it's good. But these people have no idea how lucky they are. So now you're like, well, where are they going? They're going to the in-laws house who has a 4-bedroom, 2.5. Yeah. They just put everything in storage, walked away with a big fat check, God bless them. And they're over there. Here's Pandora's box. They still can't find anything because we put multiple offers in and we lost them. So then we said, is there another option? Well, Dad did really well investing his monies in stocks. Daddy has a nice portfolio. So we go in cash with Daddy's portfolio. So they're looking, the seller, Daddy's got, wow, a nice bank account here in stocks. So if everything fails, Daddy has the assets to purchase this property, to gift the money over. The goal here, though, is to get the acceptance on a cash off of Daddy's stocks. Meanwhile, they have been fully approved for a long time because we just can't find a house to fill in the gap and an appraisal. Generally, you can get a full approval subject to an appraisal and a property. So they will come to the table with a mortgage. Daddy will never sell one stock. It's all on paper. And they're very mortgage jumbo. They've been through the whole process, subject to you know, an updated verification of employment, an appraisal, and an address. And even in the burbs with that, it's still not good enough. At some points. But there are ways to work around that. But here. It clearly indicates you went in cash. At the time we then would be accepted, we would then do what to notify the seller, the seller's agent? We have to do a change of terms, and we have to notify everybody what we're doing. With all of the particulars, who is the loan institution? You need the amount, who, the terms, and the rate. Just like you're gonna do in the rest of this paragraph. That wasn't filled out because we came in as cash. Okay? Now, here we go. Elected, so now we say, no, I don't have a rich dad. Yeah,
There's a question regarding, going from cash into a mortgage, does the seller still have the right to refuse at any terms?
with no, due to the fact if everything fails, it's still cash.
So even though it's, I mean, they're still getting their money regardless.
Regardless.
Yeah, but so they can't say, no, you needed cash, and now you're changing to a mortgage, I wanna, you know, turn it.
They could try to argue the point, but the issue is it's still cash.
Okay,
And this is after electing waived.
Correct.
does this need to happen in between, I'm sorry, when you're doing your inspection?
No, you need to do this immediately.
Yeah, but like.
So, oh, I won? By the way, I'm sending you an addendum, we are
Okay.
getting mortgage.
Okay, so it's like 12 hours or 24 hours a day.
Immediately.
Just to make sure that I'm understanding clearly, the reason why it still works is because, like you said, all else fails, it's still backed by the father, it's not fully.
That's right.
But the primary, partner for my system instead of.
Correct. It just looks better on paper. Seller is not gonna lose.
Yeah, they're still getting money either way, it's just a matter of, okay.
Yeah. Elected, this sale is contingent upon the buyer obtaining mortgage financing according to the terms outlined below. Upon receiving documentation demonstrating the mortgage lender's approval, whether conditional or outright, and that's an interesting terminology. Whether conditional or outright, does anybody know what that brief 1, 2, 3, 4 words mean? Okay, mortgage contingency, as we go further into this paragraph, is that the loan institution says, Vicki's buying a house. The loan institution says, Vicki is ready to go. We've gotten everything we need. There are a couple basic things that we always do the last minute, such as, did she get her homeowner's insurance? I need a copy of that. I have to re-verify she did. And I need a new bank statement to make sure that the money that was in there is still in there going towards her down. Or whatever the case may be. There are basic little things that are customary. So it is important, conditional, so that would make my documentation from the mortgage company say Vicki's ready to go, subject to these 5 things. Or outright, which is a rare day. It's a very rare day to get a complete approval. You might get that loan officer running in your office and go, hey, I just cleared Vicki, she could close today, and it's 2 days before closing. She's ready to go. It is acceptable to get your mortgage commitment with conditions. Now, you as the listing agent have to do what when you get that piece of paper?
Read it.
Amen, sister. Read it, because instead of maybe 4, 5, or 6 customary type of conditions needed, there could be 30 seconds, like you're flipping pages. That's when your stomach drops, you do a little tachycardia. Okay, and here's why you're gonna do tachycardia. Okay. Upon receiving documentation demonstrating the mortgage lender's approval, whether conditional or outright, of buyer's mortgage application according to the following terms. Buyer will promptly deliver a copy of the documentation to the seller, but in any case, no later than that little tiny line above the block, which notes commitment date, put a star, highlight that, okay? Because that is really important. As the listing agent, you need to know on that date, where are we with this loan? Now, you say to me, but Vic, what date am I putting in there? 7 to 10 days is pretty good before closing. Because remember, what we had read earlier was that they have 7 days to make application from the execution date. So 7 to 10 days prior to closing. That's what you're gonna put in here when you're the buyer's agent. 7 to 10 days prior to closing, you wanna say the mortgage commitment. And there will be conditions, but when there are 37 of them, that's when you pick up the telephone and you call the loan officer. Dude, the heck's going on here? Has this buyer done anything towards their mortgage?
I was gonna say, I assume you don't put 7 to 10 days, you just base it on where you're actually at, and if there's.
Okay, so you get your calendar
Right.
or your phone. However you keep records of things. When an agreement is consummated, when we have an executed agreement. You get your calendar and goes, okay, execution was September the 1st. And now we count 7 days. Do we count the 1st? No, we never count execution date. So we go 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, use your fingers, 7, 8. You mark on the calendar, make application on the 8th. You can always call the loan officer, make sure they made application. Now, you said we're settling October the 30th. So you go to October. And you put settlement date. 7 days before that, or 10 days. Boom. You write in there, make a note. Mortgage commitment date.
So that there's any more just if there's life around you or any reason to pick 7 or 10
Why am I
in
putting?
particular. I mean, if it's choose between 7 or 10, just based on timing and everybody involved.
Does it fall on a Saturday? Does it fall on a Sunday? You know, yeah. Halloween.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah,
And also consult with your mortgage lender, because he's gonna have a better idea of when you can get it.
yes, absolutely.
Because depending on the condition. Then you can, I mean, hey, I get it cleared, you know, we can do 45 days out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Vicki, I was only supposed to do like 15 days into the paragraph 884, because that's where you're supposed to log in interest rate, is that not accurate?
Locking in an interest rate has nothing to do with the commitment. Because they will have locked in their rate because it's 15 days before the 7 to 10 to take care of conditions. So the rate lock-in is not going to be a condition because they've had to do that 15 days minimal before. It's generally speaking going to be a challenge to get a lot of those conditions removed. Listen, a loan guy wants to give you a cleanest possible commitment. So those 15, 16, 17, those 5 or 7 days are going to make a difference to a loan guy, trying to clean up those conditions. Okay. All right, now, first mortgage on the property. Now you'll note here, there was a left block and a right block. Years ago, the right block played into a lot of what our mortgages did. That does not play anymore. We don't play with that block anymore. There may be a time we will, when there's a first and a second. That was 15, 20 years ago. when we didn't have the rush of appreciation. So you could actually borrow against and get your down money on a separate loan. So you take out two loans. One is 20% of the $100,000 house we're buying. And then you were doing a 5% down conventional, hypothetical, like whatever. You were pulling your monies out ahead of time. We don't deal with that anymore, so don't worry about it. Let's just try to get the first block right, okay? Loan amount. How do you determine what the loan amount is going to be that you're putting in there?
Cost of the house minus down payment.
You might think that. And that would be easy math. The most accurate, let's rely on the professional. The guy who does the math. The guy who does the math is the loan officer. You know that the most accurate estimate of closing costs is coming from the loan officer rather than you doing it in broker. Stay away from broker. You need to know what that loan officer's charges are going to be and what this total cost is going to be. Buyers must receive an estimate of closing costs before entering into an agreement of sale. Now, I've heard some crazy. The loan officer. I'm like, are you kidding me? What are you telling me? They say, yeah, they're not kidding me. I'm like, all right, put your big girl shoes on and get on the telephone. If they have to give the buyer the estimate of closing costs, according to RESPA rules and regulations, why are they not giving it to you? Here's my other thing. Listen, I know a lot of you guys are new. Ruffling a feather is not what you like to do, but not for nothing. How many phone calls do I get about these obscure situations? And I stop talking to me. Let me ask the question. Who the heck is this loan officer? Oh, it's Joe Baggins from Wisconsin. Where did Joe Baggins come from? Well, the buyers said they wanted to use it because they liked his video. You laugh. I can't make this up. I'm not that good. That's how insignificant the buyer realizes the importance of a partner in this transaction is this loan guy. When they come to you with Joe Bags from Wisconsin, you're gonna say, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I know you like their video and you think they're cool, hip, and fun. But we're here in Philadelphia. We're in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I'm going to strongly recommend we get another approval from a local vendor, a local mortgage company, indicating that you were ready, willing, and able to purchase this house. Because when Joe Bags goes in the toilet and he can't get you your mortgage, I have this backup guy who's already done the research to say, oh, I'll pick up the ball and run in for the TD. If you are a listing agent and you get an offer with a pre-approval from Joe Bags, I'm telling you, avoid accepting it if at all possible. Use the seller as your foil. Mary Jane? Bye, Mary Jane, this is Vicki. How you doing? Good. Listen, I want to thank you first off for sending me the offer on 123 Main Street. But I gotta tell you, Joe Bags from Wisconsin? What's up with that? You know, I liked his website, and they said they wanted to use him, or maybe it's my sister's brother's nephew, cousin. Oh, okay, that's always even worse than the website. Okay, so listen, my sellers, they're just not wonderful. So this is what I need you to do. For us to entertain your offer, I need another pre-approval from a local reputable mortgage company. Don't use the word BANK. You will lose your mind. Become bold. But you will hold your hair out with that. Because they have a very small program that they can offer. Rather than a mortgage broker, there's 15, 20 different venues to look at. Banks have 2 different choices. It's horrible. Try not to use banks. So I need a reputable, local mortgage broker to bring us a pre-approval in case Wisconsin goes sideways. I got somebody I can drop this loan with. Put the blame on the sellers. Especially when you're dealing with website, God forgive me, website mortgage companies. Example, many years ago. Got an offer with now Rocket Mortgage. Oh, baby Jesus. But this was a time where we weren't getting 3 and 5 and 20 offers on a property. We were getting 1 every 3 months offers. So I had to try to bubble gum it and rubber band it together. So we went with it. When it came to the commitment date, I called up Rocket. I said, listen, dude, I need a commitment. At the time, I was with Prudential Fox and Roach, and Trident was our in-house. I had to get a commitment from Trident. Take out the address, take out the name, send it to them so they understood what I was looking for, which took 10 more days for me to get it because they just never knew of such a thing. They have licenses in 50 states, doesn't mean they know what they're doing in 50 states, but they have the license. This did close. Congrats for me. It did close, but I will tell you, try to discourage your buyers. Who needs to be in charge during transactions, both on the buy side and the list side? The agent. Say it one more time, Ron. Ah, lovely. Do you have the wherewithal to be in charge? Yes. Do you? Because that's going to make a difference. How many here are parents? Those of you have a step up. It is, and I say this all respectfully, this is very much a parental role that you're taking. You don't want to think of it that way. You just want to think I'm a leader, I'm an advisor, I have experience. All true. But you will utilize parenting skills. And giving commanding statements is something you need to learn to do immediately. This is how we're going to do that, whatever it turns out to be. An agent right now is having a situation with a buyer in another state that we are licensed to work out of, and that state has very different guidelines than we do and limited paperwork. And we have to get their deposit back because we got out on an inspection. We have now hired an attorney, and it's been chaotic. I had a 3-way conversation with the attorney and this buyer and myself yesterday. And after he didn't say a whole lot. He wanted to hear what I had to say. And after I listened to her whine about this, that, and the other, I said, this is how this is going to go. There was silence. You need to draw the respect. This is how this is going to go. And I gave her what the next steps were going to be. And the attorney, after a pause, said, that's great, talk to you soon, bye. Okay, so learn to give commanding statements. All right. So we're gonna put the loan amount, you're gonna get that from the estimate of closing costs that the loan guy gave your bike. Maximum terms, which they indicate, what does terms mean? Oh, it means years. Generally, it's 30, on occasions it's not, because it could be a 15-year. It could be an ARM, an adjustable rate mortgage at 3, 5, 7, 10-year, whatever it may be, right? Type of mortgage. What are we putting on that line? Or ARM, if it's a conventional ARM, or an FHA ARM, right? Or jumbo, yeah. For conventional loans, the loan to value ratio is not to exceed X. What goes in there? What goes in there?
Now they're fine.
Yeah, whoever that was. Good job. Mortgage lender. Never am I to see to be determined. Never. Why not? Where are you getting the pre-approval from? Okay, so whomever you're getting the pre-approval from is to whom you write in there. Now, with that said, how many days do they have to make mortgage application? Okay. Could they change their mind on the loan guy? Okay, so to identify to all parties that the buyer may not be married to this loan guy, you will put Joe Bag of Donuts Mortgage Company / buyer's choice. Now you have options. Now you have options within that 7 days to make a differential from whom you received the pre-approval from. If the buyer exercises buyer's choice prior to 7 days, because now they got to make application. So day 2, they're like, Vic, you were right. I never should have used that. No, the Wisconsin guy, he's a hot mess. Okay. Here's a couple people I have in-house you might want to try. Call you back 3 hours later. I'm taking this one. Perfect. By addendum, because we've executed the agreement. By addendum, you're going to identify now who the mortgage lender is going to be. The loan amount, the terms, and the type of mortgage. You're going to reiterate all of these points and the interest rate due to the fact because we're changing. Okay. So we need to know who the loan institution is. Maybe it's a / buyer's choice at an interest rate of X. However, buyer agrees to accept the interest rate as may be committed by a mortgage lender not to exceed the maximum interest rate of Y. What number goes in the first on line 153? The rate the loan institution gave. That goes on the low end. The high end, 25 to 50% differential. So let's pretend. Let's pretend the low end is 7. You would either go 7.25 or 7.50, right? 0.25 is 25% increase, or 0.50 is 50%. If you make them too close, a good listing agent's going to pick it up and go, no. Rates are too variable right now. I need a bigger spread. Because once a rate exceeds the max, guess what? Buyer's out of the contract. That's a conditional. Okay. Discount points, loan origination, loan placement, and other fees charged by a lender as a percentage of the mortgage loan, excluding any mortgage insurance premium or VA funding fees, not to exceed blank, 0 if not specified of the mortgage loan. When you get that estimate of closing costs from the loan guy, you're gonna see either origination fee at the top. Is the very beginning on their charges. There's a block that's gonna have their charges in most cases. At the top will be origination and second is discount. You can buy down a rate. What's that mean? That means I can throw money at the loan guy, instead of getting 7, I might be able to get 6.87 back. Because I paid X amount of dollars for them to move me down on the rate. That's calling buy down the rate. Sometimes we use that when we're doing seller's assist. And we didn't do it right. And we said, we want $10,000 back seller's assist, and nobody bothered to do the math. And we find out that the seller said, okay, and they sign off. Which can only be used for what? Closing costs. And guess what? Our closing costs are only $8,500. Now, what do we do with that $1,500? Do we give it back? We round it out, right? Because we already approved for that extra $1,500 from the seller. So maybe that money can be used for the buyer to buy down the rate. Maybe they have to throw a little bit more into it, but they're ahead of the game and now they're buying down the rate. Because we made a mathematical error. Okay, now we move on. The interest rate and fees provisions in paragraph 8F are satisfied if the mortgage lender gives the buyer the right to guarantee an interest rate and fees at or below the maximum level stated. Buyer gives seller the right at seller's sole option and as permitted by law and the mortgage lender to contribute financially without promise of reimbursement. What does that mean? To contribute financially without promise of reimbursement. Seller's assist to a buyer and or mortgage lender to make the above mortgage terms available to buyer. Seller may, pay attention here. Seller may terminate this agreement after the commitment date by written notice to the buyer if, and this is showing you the importance of the mortgage commitment. Seller does not receive a copy of the documentation distributing the mortgage lender's conditional or outright approval of buyer's mortgage application by the commitment date. Underline that. That has to go with line 144. They go together. The documentation demonstrates the mortgage lender's conditional or outright approval of mortgage application does not satisfy the loan terms outlined in paragraph 8F. Well, paragraph 8F is this block. So if the commitment comes back with different terms, you're like, wait a minute, dude, you want to pick up the phone and call someone? The documentation demonstrating the mortgage lender's conditional and outright approval of the buyer's mortgage application containing any conditions not specified in the agreement, such as buyer must settle on another property, and an appraisal must be received by the lender, or the approval is not valid through the settlement date, that is not satisfied and or removed in writing by the mortgage lender within 7 days of the commitment date. That 7 days is telling us whatever conditions are listed by the loan institution, the loan institution has 7 days to remove those conditions. After the commitment date or any extension thereof, other than in writing by a mortgage lender. Oh, wait, I think we crossed the line here. Or any extension thereof, other than those conditions that are customarily satisfied at or near settlement, such as obtaining insurance, confirming employment. Those conditions that are I think I need stronger glasses. I keep like rereading the same line. Seller's right to terminate continues until buyer delivers documentation demonstrating the mortgage lender's conditional or outright approval of buyer's mortgage application to the seller. Until seller terminates this agreement pursuant to the paragraph, buyer must, underline this, continue to make a good faith effort to obtain mortgage financing. Termination of this agreement by the buyer due to mortgage lender denial of buyer's mortgage application may demonstrate bad faith by the buyer and result in forfeiture of deposit monies to the seller. There are those buyer agents who seem to feel that if I get a denial from the seller, all's good and everybody's getting their money back. No, that ain't how it happens. You could have a loan guy say, listen, I tried, but that buyer just went underground. I can't reach them, they don't reply to the emails, I don't want to tell you. So that's really bad. Oh, didn't we talk about that earlier? That they have to be diligent in working with their loan officer? Yeah, we did. Okay,
Can I ask a question?
yes,
So when you're saying that, if the application is determined that, you know, there's bad faith by the buyer, they're trying not to rectify whatever the conditional, the conditions are for the loan to be approved. It's not if they couldn't get the committed for things that were out of their control.
correct.
Okay,
They just went underground.
great.
I can't try to correct something the loan guy says if I don't have communication.
But if they're still able to, they're communicating with the buyer, they're doing everything they can to rectify these conditions, and then for whatever reason they still can't.
That's different.
Right, so that's what I was making, that's what I was trying to clarify, there's a difference
Yeah.
between that, but then looking like.
Right.
I guess my question is kind of a follow-up, and in either way, ask it, if they're at no fault, then they get to keep their money, right? But
See that statement? Everybody thinks, sellers, don't worry about this. They screwed up, you're gonna get their deposit.
No, the buyer get to keep their deposit if they weren't at fault, is what I meant.
No. The only way, and we as agents have to stop giving a blank statement like that. The only way deposit monies are returned is mutual acceptable written agreement or court order.
Remember, I had that case where that kid backed out. Remember, he was like, no, I don't wanna do this, and he just called his mortgage guy and said, forget it, and it was when our mortgage commitment due. And to wrap that up, it was only $3,000 deposit, that kid kept saying, I get all my money back, and we were like, no, it goes to the seller. And we had to get you involved and the other broker, and we all came to terms that part would go to the seller and part would go to the buyer, but it took us like a week to work that out.
Now, we as brokers have different guidelines with the state than other institutions such as a title company. And there are sellers who think they're just so damn smart. And they'll go, I don't want the money to be held by a title company. Because they think they could glean the money easily if there's a deficiency. No, no, no. Reputable title companies play by the same rules. They're not mandated like we are as real estate brokers, but they'll play by the same rules. No, I'm not returning anybody's money until I have mutual acceptable written agreement or a court order. Okay, so we as agents have to stop saying, don't worry about it, you're going to get your money back. Yeah, you need to worry about it, because only one side can say yes and the other side says no, nothing's happening. That is stalemate. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars held in escrow accounts for
Vicki, if something was to come down to that, and you were trying to terminate this. Get the money back.
the seller can't put that back on the market until that's resolved, is that correct? Or they can relist it and then it. They can. I'm in a situation right now where the attorney said to me, and I can't believe they relisted it. I didn't say anything. The question is, are they truly out of the contract? The sellers? Well. Yeah, because the terms weren't met, that puts everybody in a default, so yeah, we could go with that. But it is customary that the property immediately gets put back on the market. Now, softening of the heart with the seller often happens when they get a new offer. And then they'll soften up and say, okay, I'll give the money back. There's also something nobody pays attention to. Nobody. Any of you who've been in a closing, there is a title company affidavit that the seller signs. The affidavit states that they are not in another contract. Could you argue the point that the offer they had 3 weeks before this offer had them in a contractual relationship and they have not returned the deposit money? Could you argue that point? And then by arguing that point, does that make the seller in default when they sign it and say, no, I'm not in another contract? Good listing agents, and I can tell you, I've only seen it happen a few times. And I smiled to myself and thought, that's a good listing agent. Goes to the table with the second buyer. Seller's all happy. You gotta play the moods here. And when they're ready to sign the affidavit from the title company, that agent slipped over to the seller and said, here's the release for the first buyers. I want you to sign this because see this line right here? You're stating you are not in a contractual relationship. And let's make it true because you will be lying on your signature. Good listing agent. I've only seen a handful do this. Prime time, you gotta learn how to work the emotion. And at the table, everybody's happy because everybody's getting money or everybody's getting a house. At that point, you slide that piece of paper over, listing agent, and say, listen, now you were all pissy, but now we're here, we need you to sign this because you will be lying on this affidavit. Yes.
That's your question. So that would be just to more solidify or just cover your tail. Because they, for example, the buyer also didn't continue to follow up with whatever they needed to make the closing occur. So that's just covering your tail so that no way someone can come back. Okay, second question, I've heard that the buyer should put a lien on the property because of that money that goes back to them so that the seller can't sell.
And what is that called? Liz pendants, which puts a cloud on title. That I have seen happen, but we're not talking like $10,000. We're talking when somebody's got $50,000 down, generally. I have been told, I don't know it to be factual, that it's actually something that an individual can do online and not hire an attorney, but that has happened and they did it all wrong. And now Friday I have to go to court for this. Okay, so you know, if you're gonna raise a ruckus, let's do it right and get yourself an attorney. Yes, a Liz pendants can be filed against the property, which puts a cloud on title, which means the next buyer can't get a clear marketable title because this is still hanging. It's purgatory. We're there. We got to do something about it. Okay. But the answer is yes. Not often done, very much to the circumstances with that transaction. Okay. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Was the name of the form you said a good listing agent would put in front of their client in that scenario to resolve?
Oh, the termination and return of deposit money form, which is our PAR form.
If they don't get that, if they're not a good listing agent, if they don't get that done.
That could. How dangerous is that for the seller? I don't have that answer. But you know what, knowing enough to know and say it. Is generally enough to motivate the seller to do what they have to do. Cause you are held liable. So this goes further. And documents are pulled, and a good attorney's gonna ask for the affidavit, and he's gonna throw that out. Very, very, very few agents know that that clause is even in the affidavits. So, next time you guys represent a seller, how about you get a copy of it? Novel concept. There's other things in there that you may go, cock your head like a robin. Interesting, okay? You are to represent your seller. If your seller is signing forms, what the hell are you signing? Okay? Okay. All right, let's go back to F4, if this agreement is terminated pursuant to paragraph 8F2, or the mortgage loan is not obtained for settlement, all deposit monies will be returned to the buyer according to paragraph 26 of this agreement and be void. That is a loosey-goosey statement. Buyer will not be responsible for any cost accrued by buyer for any inspections or certifications obtained according to the terms of this agreement, and any costs accrued for buyer such as title search, title insurance, and/or mechanic lien insurance, or any fees for cancellation such as flood, fire, hazard, mining insurance, or any fees for cancellation such as appraisal fees or charges paid in advance to a mortgage lender. If the mortgage lender or the property and casualty insurer provider providing insurance required by the mortgage lender requires repairs to the property, buyer will, upon receiving the requirements, deliver a copy of the requirements to the seller. Now, on an FHA, more likely you're going to see something, oh, you got to fix this. Conventional, it's a rare bird, but it does happen. On a conventional, the appraiser is upstairs and the back bedroom corner is stained with water. He's like, I want a roof certification. Because in his mind, this roof is leaking. Okay. He goes in and he can't get the heater to turn on. I need a heating certification. It happens. Don't be shocked and dazed and truly amazed. If you ever get one of these, you're like, okay, I remember Vic telling me this. This can happen. Okay. Within 5 days of receiving a copy of the requirements, seller will notify buyer whether the seller will make the required repairs at seller's expense. So the moment the buyer gets this from the loan officer is going to call and say, Vic, I know it's conventional, but guess what? Not for nothing, the heater wouldn't kick on. Now, it's not the appraiser's job to go over to the circuit breaker and see if something trips. Not his job, and it could be that simple of a cure or remedy. But we now have the appraisal that is showing something that is mandated as a repair or correction from the appraiser. Within 5 days of receiving the copy of the requirements, seller will notify buyer whether the seller will make required repairs at seller's expense. So immediately when the buyer gets this from the loan guy, was the appraiser's working for whom? Who does the appraiser work for? The bank, the loan institution, right? If seller makes the required repairs to the satisfaction of the mortgage lender and or insurer, buyer will accept the property and agree to release in paragraph 28 of this agreement. Now, paragraph 28 will haunt us forever once we get there. Yes.
If the buyer is using grants, do these grants get placed in the second mortgage?
That's a very good question. And I don't have the answer, but I would suggest checking with the loan officer who is part of that grant. It's a good question. If seller will not make the required repairs, or if seller fails to respond within the stated time. What is the stated time? 5 days. Buyer will, within 5 days, notify seller of buyer's choice to make the repairs and improvement at buyer's expense. Buyer's like, look, I know this is a good deal. I know this is horse hockey, but it's gotta get done. But we need to do it, so with permission and access to the property given by the seller, which will not be unreasonably withheld. Seller may require that buyer sign a pre-settlement possession agreement, such as a pre-settlement possession addendum. That form does exist. They're identifying what it is. It's a PAR form and it's known as a PRE, which shall not, in and of itself, be considered unreasonable. It is not unreasonable for a buyer to take on that task and say, okay, I'll take care of these. Okay? With the form signed, of course. Terminate this agreement with written notice to the seller, with all deposit monies returning to the buyer according to the terms of paragraph 26 of this agreement. If buyer fails to respond within the time stated above, or fails to terminate this agreement by written notice to the seller within that time, guess what? Buyer will accept the property, make the required repairs or improvements at buyer's expense, and agree to release in paragraph 28 of this agreement. Just because you go underground doesn't mean you're done. You have to have acknowledgement on what side of the fence am I jumping on. Change in buyer's financial status. Here we go. If a change in buyer's financial status affects the buyer's ability to purchase, such as buyer will promptly notify seller and lenders to whom the buyer submitted a mortgage application, if any, in writing. A change in financial status includes, but is not limited to, loss or change of employment, fail or lose of sale, loss of sale, of buyer's home. Buyer have accrued a new financial obligation, entered into a judgment against the buyer. Buyer understands that applying for and or accruing any additional financial obligation may affect the buyer's ability to purchase. Now, you'll note that last sentence is in bold ink. What are they talking about?
Buy a car.
Yes. Do not buy a car, do not buy furniture for the new house. Do not. Now you gotta be mean mommy, especially when you have first time home buyers. I sold my niece and her husband a house. I said, put your goddamn credit cards away. After the closing, so this was 6 weeks, 2 months, right? After the closing, we go out to lunch. We get out of the car and she said, "In fact," I said, "What, baby? Can I use my credit card?" Which I giggled and I said, "Of course, baby." But what did that tell me when she asked me that question? She listened to you. She listened. Aunt Vicki said, "Put them in a drawer and do not use them." Smart, right? She put it in a drawer and she did not use it. Even though loan officers do this as part of their spiel, their shtick all the time when they're getting, there is so much coming at that buyer from all different directions, things get messed. And they're all, and yeah, I'm finally gonna get that new couch, the one that the dog eat on before. I don't want to bring that to the new house. No, you have to help the loan officer, help your buyer, guide them. But that credit cards, no, nay. Give them to your mother. Put them in the safe deposit box. I don't care what you do. Do not use those credit cards.
I didn't really work with mortgages much, so it might be kind of a stupid question, but you have extra costs written into the loan to like buy furniture and stuff?
No, and here's why. When we go way back into real estate school, what is the term for personal property? And loan institutions do not want to finance chattels. Chattels depreciate in value. Think about used furniture. Used furniture has minimal value at best, even the highest end type of, or higher end quality, Ethan Allen furniture. Something that's decent, you know, like it's dovetail drawers and center rails and mahogany wood. Nope, what you pay 10,000 for a dining room set, 5 years later, you maybe will get 4,000 for it, maybe. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's, you know, it's like taking a new car off the line, same thing. So for that reason, loan institutions don't want to finance chattels. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about. So listen, when you have a buyer call you and say, listen, I just got laid off. What is the first thing you do? Call the loan guy. We got a problem. You're going to need a letter of termination to reiterate to the seller, this is for real, we're not making this up. It really did get laid off. Seller's representation, status of water. Seller represents that the property is served by public, community water, on-site water, which would be a well, or none, right? So you got to know what type of water. Status of sewer, is it public, individual lot disposed with proximity to a well? That's a community sewer disposal system, 10-acre permitted exemptions, whatever it happens to be. In the city of Philadelphia, there's either 1 or 2 blocks in West Philly that still have private sewage. I know it's crazy. And I keep forgetting to get where it is. But I know that this actually years ago, agent came to me and said, Jesus Christ, this thing has private sewage. What am I doing? It's really crazy. But it's important that you know that. More importantly, is to determine that these things are working properly, because they can be outrageously expensive to make corrections to. Notice of Pennsylvania Sewage Facilitation Act. There is no current existing community sewer system available for the subject property. This whole paragraph here breaks into detail about holding tanks, individual sewage systems, individual systems to be installed at an isolated distance from a well, blah, 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 blah. If you have public water, you don't even have to worry about 10B2. But if you don't, pay attention to what you got. Now, C is really important. Seller is not aware of historical preservational restrictions regarding the property unless otherwise stated here. In the city of Philadelphia, we are inundated with properties that have historical restrictions on them. And it doesn't mean it's 200 years old. In Society Hill, you can have a house that's 50 years old and it has historical restrictions on it. So, how do you know? Don't rely on the sellers because they're goofs. So is the agent. How do you know if a property has historic restrictions on it? Okay. On right under public records, it will indicate if a property on the bottom right has historic preservational restrictions. Okay, now with that said, how accurate is Bright? Only as good as whoever punched it in there, right? So be cautious because you want C filled out if you know that it has historical, you want that seller to indicate that. It also needs to be indicated where else? Seller's property disclosure, which is a whole nother class. Land use restrictions. This would deal with properties that have restrictions and that you were selling a piece of land. Open space. Conservation restrictions. All of this and the rest of this section here only deals when you're dealing with those type of issues. We're generally going to talk about residential. E, really important. Real estate seller disclosure law. Generally, the real estate seller disclosure law requires that before the agreement of sale is signed, how many times do I have to say that? Before, not after, not like 3 days later, not like I meant to get it and forgot, no. The seller in a residential estate transfer must make certain disclosures regarding the property to potential buyers in a form identified by law. Now, let me tell you something. There is the standard PAR seller's property disclosure form. And guess what? The state has a form too. You don't want anybody else out in the real world to know about that form, because it's terrible. It's really, really terrible. The PAR form is extremely detailed, where the state form is caca at best. All right, so we don't want the world to know that there is an option. They don't need to know it, okay? So you always want to use the PAR form, but to make you an educated agent, there is another form out there by the state. A residential real estate transfer is defined as a sale, exchange, installment sale contract, lease with the option to buy. Let me just touch on this for a nanosecond. We as real estate agents do not ever get yourself involved with the option to buy contract. There are no forms for it because it's way over our pay grade. Oh, yes, there are real estate agents out there who in the MLS will identify they can do this. Don't you dare do it. First off, I don't even know if your E&O will cover it. Don't you dare do it. Has to be done by attorneys. Grant or otherwise transfer an interest in real property where not less than 1 and not more than 4 residential dwelling units are involved. Disclosure for condominiums and cooperatives are limited to seller's particular unit. That also applies to home inspections. You're doing a home inspection for a condo, it's within the walls. This became a problem when the agent for the buyer is telling the inspector to go downstairs and look around and tell me what you see. It's not his job to do that. Okay. Disclosure regarding common areas of facilities are not required, as those elements are already addressed in the laws that govern the resale of condominiums and cooperative. I will say one time many years ago, I was there. Why was I there? Because I didn't have the buyer. Maybe I had the seller. I don't know why I was there. I was there. And this agent convinced the inspector to go down in the basement. Huh. We happened to find termites. They had no idea, the condo association had no idea that there were termites down there. So they were like, oh my God, thanks. But generally, you don't get involved with that, okay? And well, they were great friends. Like me. Okay, here we go. Public and or private assessments. Seller represents that as of the date the seller signed this agreement, no public improvements, condominium or homeowner associations assessments have been made against the property which remain unpaid, and that no notice by any government or public authority, excluding assessed value, have been served upon the seller or anyone on seller's behalf, including notice relating to violations of zoning, housing, building, safety or fire ordinances that remain uncorrected, and that the seller knows of no condition that would constitute a violation of any such ordinances that remain uncorrected unless otherwise specified here. So we're talking about violations on the property. Violations can be on any property. The $3.3 million house could have a violation, and so does that $50,000 house. Okay. I know we get all wrapped up in everything, but not for nothing. Go on the website, Philadelphia, and search the property, and scroll down to see if there's any violations, either on the lifting side and or when you're working with the buyer. You're just taking yourself to the next level, rather than getting a UNO with 6 violations. Now, there are violations for rehabs, such as broken windows, overgrown grass, infested with rodents. Yeah, we don't care. They're called nuisance liens because we're gonna buy it, gut it anyway. So you're like, yeah. Buyer says, I'll take it with those nuisance liens, right? But when you're talking about incomplete permits, this wasn't closed out, you're dealing with the city, you better find out what's happening, especially if you're going to do a rehab. Make sure that the new owner took care of that once they obtained it. And those bumps and bruises aren't hanging on. Right? So we always have to check them. Seller knows of no potential notice, including violations and or assessments, except the following. If you go to a listing and you know this property has violations, your job as the listing agent in getting a signature is have them identify that on this line. Highway occupancy permit. Access to a public road may require. Ooh, that's a tough one. What's that word? Instances of highway occupancy permit from the Department of Transportation. Okay. So access to a public road, if you end up selling something that is landlocked, which honestly, God, I just knew of something damn sure that happened. They were buying a landlocked and had to go through all this easement stuff and craziness and had to pay off all these people the amount of ground that they were taking to allow an easement to go in, craziness. But then that may apply here, right? All right, this is really important. H is a recent change. I want you to take the Bible that I told you you didn't bring, shame on you, and I want you to look up this paragraph. So let's figure out where the heck that is.
Page 33.
33?
Yeah, 33.
Thank you. Let's look at 33. So because the world has become a full-head place, and everybody feels they need to know what's going on in their house, and all this kind of shenanigans, we've had to add something in particular. And paragraph H, because we are on the 33 or 32, 32, no, it's not 32.
33, second paragraph.
H.
Above paragraph.
Ah, my boss, okay. All right, first off, let's look at the agreement. Internet and things, LOT devices. The presence of smart and green home devices that are capable of connecting to the internet directly or indirectly, and the data stored on them, on those various devices, make up a digital ecosystem in the property, sometimes referred as Internet of Things. Christmas trees. Buyer and seller acknowledge that the Internet of Things device may transmit data to third parties outside of the control of the owner. On or before settlement, seller will make a reasonable effort to clear all data stored on all of the Internet of Things devices located on the property, such as, and include in the sale. Seller further acknowledges that all personal devices owned by the seller, included but not limited to cell phones, personal computers, and tablets, have connectively to any IoT device. Having
Connectivity.
Thank you. Located on the property will be disconnected and cleared of relevant data prior to settlement. Further, no attempt will be made after settlement by seller or anyone on seller's behalf to access any of the Internet of Things devices remaining on the property. Following settlement, buyer will make a reasonable effort to clear all stored data from the IoT devices remaining on the property and to restrict access to said devices by the seller. Seller agrees that any third party to whom the seller may have previously provided access. This includes, but not limited to, restoring the IoT device to its original setting, changing passwords or codes, updating network settings, and submitting change of ownership and contact information to device manufacturer and services. Mommy.
Vicki, can I make that real simple for everyone?
Yeah, you go ahead.
So there's, obviously Internet of Things can encompass a ton of different stuff. I mean, just about everything connects to the internet these days. But the big thing that like the major thing that you want to make sure you're doing this for is any surveillance systems. That's like the number one like red flag. Like, please make sure that if you are the listing agent, your seller is factory resetting these things and removing the apps from their devices and cannot access this. But again, there's that line in there, as the buyer's agent, it's also your responsibility post settlement. You go through a checklist with your buyers, like, all right, post settlement, here's the things that you need to do. One of those things, right along with change the locks, is make sure you're going through and doing your due diligence with all of these things as well. And that's not just surveillance systems. You have, a lot of homes now are coming with built-in like in-wall speakers that are all connected to like a Sonos hub, or you have your Nest thermostats. There's so many different things there, but if it connects to the internet, your sellers need to disconnect it from their access, and your buyers need to make sure that when they come in, they're checking it right away to make sure that it is factory wiped and that it's ready for them to use and only them. In addition, I was asked to make sure that we can pay attention to the chat, and what I'll say to those of you on Zoom, instead of just using the chat, please feel free to unmute yourselves at appropriate times and ask your questions, because it's just easier for everyone if you do so. Are there any chat questions that had not been covered that anyone still wants to bring up?
I'll ask since it was my last question, going back to section F with the public and or private assessments, is this where you would notate if there's any current HOA special assessments on that unit that are being paid off but not fully paid off by the seller?
That's a good idea. You wouldn't be doing anything wrong by doing that because you're identifying that there is a special assessment. I've had recently issues with HOAs and following through, first off, on the time frame, which we'll discuss, when they are supposed to get their act together and have everything sent over to the appropriate parties and identifying the special assessments. So adding that in there would not be a wrong thing to do. You could very well do that, yes. It's not a violation, but it is a dangling participle. So all that we have left onto the property. So, yeah, go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
So, along with her question, we also remember had a situation where the title company mandated that the seller be responsible to pay off the remaining 3 years of a 10-year assessment because it was not specified in this section. So I guess I would suggest it be done.
Yeah.
It costs our seller a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
Ife, I did see your question. The well building mastermind will not be zoomed, but I can send you the presentation from it. And anyone else that wants that presentation, who is not going to be able to physically attend, email me jp@kwphiladelphia.com and I will get you the presentation. And then before I go sit myself back down, did anyone have any more questions about the IoT stuff? Deborah?
This is a related issue, the US Postal Service has an informed delivery service. Has there been any discussion of that with realtors? Cause I mean, I sold a house and was getting the new residents pictures of their mail for several weeks. It took to cancel that service.
Yeah, I mean, things like that are still so new that to my understanding, we don't yet have anything firm in place. But, you know, as agents take that extra step, you know, again, there's, for instance, Amazon has like in garage deliveries for a lot of stuff. You know, we're in the day and age where you might want to tell your sellers, like, go in your Amazon account, delete this address, you know, remove the access, like all those different things that didn't have to think about before, you know, a year or two ago. You know, please, for the love of God, I don't know why anyone would, but don't leave like an Alexa in the house. Like you can order things on your Amazon through your Alexa. Don't leave it in the house. Take it with you. You don't need it. They can get their own Alexa. Anyone else with an yeah, Brent?
Might be more for the room, but with things like smart fridges, I know I've seen like mirrors even now and some of the newer living out there, but has anyone seen like somebody really want their smart fridge to go with them as opposed to, you know, the fridge?
Yeah.
I can tell you, I've seen it, not even from the real estate side of things. Before I got into real estate, I ran an appliance and electronics store, and I saw buyers come in that, you know, were like, well, I'm gonna get a 3-piece kitchen package because I'm demanding that they leave their smart fridge in. And I saw sellers come in going, oh no, I'm taking my smart fridge, so I'm just buying a cheap fridge to replace the fridge in the house. You know, it's one of those things that it's a case by case basis. You know, again, never let your buyers assume that anything is coming with the property. But, you know, again, if you are in a situation where a smart fridge is being left in the house for the buyers, the sellers have a responsibility to make sure that that's factory reset, and the buyers have a responsibility when they come in to make sure that that's been done.
Great, thank you for that.
It's about that, I was wondering, so this is community with the Internet of Things. For the final walkthrough, is that when me as a buyer agent, I would check to see if it was a factory reset? And then bring it up if it's not at the table or prior to the table?
You could,
Like that, or is it?
yeah, I mean, so it's definitely something where by the time you're doing the final walkthrough, the seller should have done their due diligence with all these things. And it's a great time for you to have that conversation with your buyers. Just, you know, as you're checking to make sure everything works, as you're making sure everything is cleaned up, you know, just say like, hey, oh, you know what? I noticed there are in-wall speakers here, you know, and if you don't know, if you see in-wall speakers, talk to the other side and ask them what they're hooked up to. Because the number of people I see who buy a house that has like a speaker system run, and they're just like, oh, I don't know where these run to, I don't know what it's hooked up to. You know, it doesn't necessarily matter, but it's something that your buyer, they're paying for a house that has in-wall speakers, they should know how to use them. But also, it again may be hooked up to something that is internet connected. And it's just in everyone's best interest to make sure that everyone knows how to use those things and to make sure it's clear.
So on that note, not used frequently, and you must be using this form. Today is closing. We're doing our walkthrough. You as the buyer's agent need to bring with you a pre-settlement walkthrough form. It is a must. Couple of things. If you had a punch list of repairs that were going to be done by the seller and they agreed to it, you take that with you to make sure everything matches up. With the issue here with this devices would be a good time because it requires two signatures, the seller and the buyer, that you indicate the seller has done their due diligence and have erased all of the devices. Of which time, if the seller hasn't done it, you don't want to sign it. Wait, I forgot to do that. Wait, now we know that's out of the bag. Because at the table, we're trying to get them to sign something. That form is priceless because when a week later, your buyer comes back and goes, holy smokes, this isn't working. Well, they signed off on it 7 days ago, it was working, what happened? Or they go to the seller's agent and the seller's agent goes, what are you talking about? You didn't tell me it wasn't working on the day we closed. Well, you have this paperwork to follow you around. Always make sure at closing, you have your buyers fill out and sign a pre-settlement walkthrough form. Okay, it's a par form, it's in there.
The last thing that I'll mention before I sit down with the IoT stuff, smart locks. Reset them. A lot of them have, like you'll know the code. Usually if a house is a smart lock, a lot of times they won't even do a lockbox. They just have the punch in code. You not only do you want to know how to reset that code, but how to factory reset, because most of the time they have a master passcode that you can use to add additional codes. Don't put your buyers in a bad situation. Don't put your sellers in a potentially litigious situation. A lot of them also have, again, Wi-Fi connectivity where someone can unlock, I can unlock my front door from my phone. Your seller needs to remove their ability to do that. Your buyer needs to make sure that there is no longer ability to access that way.
Excellent, thank you for bringing all this up.
What about, the new owner have to know how to like use like technology, it might be newer and older technology, like a thermostat or like an alarm, that like you call it how to do it or?
Well, yeah, like, man, if I bought a house with all this, first of all, I wouldn't even know how to tell you if the thing was, I know nothing, okay, nothing. And so I admit to nothing. So if I was buying the house with all these toys, let me just say this, I had a computerized thermostat removed from my house. I wanted the dial, the guy took him 3 weeks to find one. I said, get that son of a gun out of my house, I can't stand it. I had the old fashioned dial. So with that said, make arrangements with the listing agent. Listen, could you please ask the seller if we come over to help us go through all this? I just had a closing a couple months ago in the city where they had a pool. And this guy never had a pool. He didn't have a clue. We made arrangements. He came over, the seller said, here's how the filter works. Here's the shut off. Here's the breaker. Here's this. This is the kind of chemicals I use. You want to do this in the spring. When you open it up, this you do in the fall. So most sellers are reasonable people. If you don't have a reasonable person, it's an estate. And the kids from Wisconsin who's responsible has no clue. You're going to have to try to figure something out.
Everything is on YouTube too. Literally everything is on YouTube.
Yeah, but
I just remember that, when I moved in, I wasn't told how to use like the timer for like the lights and all that, so they've just been on.
I get you. Mine could be on too. I don't know what to say, but try to work something out with the seller and see if you can do that. All right, let's just read paragraph each in the Bible. Internet of Things, LOT devices. The addition of technology to real property has created a new aspect of the real estate transaction to be considered. Not only the devices themselves, but also the data stored on them or transmitted to a third party. These devices are meant to be personalized to their owner and will likely have settings and information stored on them that is specific to the seller. Sometimes, prior to settlement, sellers should clear whatever data they can from the device that will stay with the property, as well as from any personal mobile devices, such as John Paul talked about on their phone, that connects to them. Buyers should also take responsibility for securing the devices, which could include returning the device to factory preset and deleted stored data. I don't want to tell you, don't want to do it, how many times I get a call from an attorney who says, your agent's buyer let themselves in the house and I have it on the ring. What part of that do I throw up at the basket next to me? Go to ethics. You cannot give any access to any potential buyer without supervision. The answer is no, positively. The worst part is you dumbass. You did it while we all watched you do it. Okay? Be conscious. Here's the other thing. When you see that bell, that fancy little thing on the outside, note. It has a great pickup system. If you want to talk about this property, you better go across the street. Do not stand on that step on the car. Point that out to the buyer as you go in. And go like this. You want to talk about the property, you'll talk about it away from how ugly it is, how it smells like cat pee, or oh my God, this place is gorgeous and I gotta have it. That pendulum swings both ways. Be very, very careful. Okay?
What do you do? There are these new laws that like each modes and agents are giving buyers access without like walking here, because they're like, oh, I know this is first, this is like that. That against.
Absolutely against the code of ethics. You know, not for nothing, you guys ought to read the code of ethics. I've had to bring this up several times recently, and everyone's oblivious about it. You are realtors. You stand by a higher standard. And the code of ethics is what that is. You better start reading it and knowing it, like, oh, we can't do that. Okay. Highway, let's see what else we got. Highway occupancy permit. Access to a public road may require. Oh, I did, that's that hard word again. Thanks. This paragraph will survive settlement on H4. That means this paragraph can haunt us, those closings. Pleasure. It's a truth. Waiving of contingency. If this agreement is contingent on buyer's right to inspect and repair the property or to verify insurability, environmental conditions, boundaries, certification, zoning, classification of use, or any other information regarding the property, buyer's failure to exercise any of the buyer's options within the time set forth in this paragraph is waived of that contingency, and buyer accepts the property and agrees to release in paragraph 28 of this agreement. Let's talk about. No, we're not going to talk about. Let's talk about the first part of paragraph 12. Rights and responsibilities. Seller will provide access to insurers, representatives, and as may be required by this agreement or by mortgage lender to surveyors, municipal officers, appraisers, and inspections. In addition, unless otherwise agreed, underline this. Parties and their real estate licensees may attend any inspections. So. Bill and Nancy Smith are buying the house. Who shows up for the inspections? Bill and Nancy Smith, not Uncle Joe, and not the 3 kids he's babysitting. Okay, that was part of the reason this was added. This isn't a free for all. This doesn't show the family what I just got. Okay.
Do you actually tell them no? They want to bring like.
Yes.
Father and say, don't, can't.
You, one individual, you could probably get away with it, especially if daddy's gonna contribute financially,
Right.
but it's not a gaggle coming through.
Yeah, good luck with that, dad being.
Yeah.
Dad, I'm gonna tell you this, if you say it with authority, it usually goes over big with them, so even if you don't feel as confident.
Right.
Say it with authority, so I say to my buyers, I just want to remind you, the only people that are coming to the home inspection are you and me and the inspector. And if it's a couple, it's the 2 of them, or just one of them. I make it very clear that no one else is permitted. If they push back and they say my dad, then I'm like, you can, but your father has to stand back, but you have to let the inspector do his job. But I stress that, but if you say with authority, I would say, especially for the pandemic, it worked to our advantage.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't take people.
Right.
There was half the time I wasn't allowed at home inspection.
Right.
Because of the rule, and that just cleared everything up, but if I say with authority, I had a lot of luck with the parents not.
And reiterating, it is already pre-printed in the agreement of sale.
Right.
So that helps, right? Okay, buyer may make 2 pre-settlement walkthrough inspections of the property for the limited purpose of determining that the condition of the property is as required by the agreement and by addendum. Buyer's rights to these inspections is not waived by any other provision of the agreement. This was put in because if there is a laundry list of repairs that everyone has agreed upon that the seller is going to complete, you may want in that addendum identify that within 7 days of closing, I will exercise my 1 of 2 pre-settlement inspections to confirm the work has been completed. Okay? Seller will have heat and utilities, including fuel, on for all inspections. I can't tell you how many times this is accidentally missed, accidentally on purpose missed. You may want to, as a reiteration of this line, type on the back of the agreement, the last page has area where you can add little ditties. And adding the ditty, it is understood and agreed by all parties that the seller will have all utilities on and working at time of inspection. Even though it says it here, nobody sees it, very much. All inspections, including home inspectors, are authorized by buyer to provide a copy of the inspection report to the broker for the buyer. Seller has a right upon request to receive a free copy of any inspection report from the party for whom it was repaired. There's a lot of old biddies. I included myself, who will say, oh, no, my buyer paid for that, nobody's getting it. No, unfortunately, I need you to read this one. You need to know where all these little idiosyncrasies are. Yeah.
No, with that, like, did you send it as meeting to that home inspection?
No, the home inspector sends it to you and the buyer first, so it's gonna be your responsibility, not that inspector. Okay, it goes on to say. Seller has the right upon request, oh, I did say that, except seller does not have the right to receive a copy of the lender's appraisal report. Underline that, star it, yellow it. You're gonna get somebody who says, oh, Vic, I forgot, I meant to ask you, did you send me that appraisal report? They just assume you don't know enough to know. But you're an educated agent now you know. Nobody on the sell side gets that. The only time they get that is if we have an issue and it comes in light. If it comes in light, then you're gonna share. But if it doesn't come in light, it comes in that value and or greater, Mingo. Yeah, we're good with the appraisal. So you have to say, yeah, we're good. We're good. Okay. Buyer waives or elects at buyer's expense to have the following inspections, certifications and investigations referred to as inspections or inspections performed by a professional contractor. I just had somebody ask me this, so let's read this. Performed by a professional contractor, home inspector, engineer, architect, and other properly licensed or otherwise qualified professionals. All inspections shall be non-invasive unless otherwise agreed to in writing. What might be an invasive inspection? Stucco, right, because they drill. If the same license and otherwise qualified professional, all inspections shall be not, I just said that. If the same inspector is inspecting more than one system, the inspector must comply with the home inspection law, see in paragraph 12D. For elected inspections, buyer will, within the contingency period stated in paragraph 13A, complete the inspection. So if it's a 10-day turnaround, 10 days from the execution date, we're going to do our inspections. You have to A, complete the inspection, obtain an inspection report or results referring to as report or reports, and accept the property. Terminate this agreement or submit a written corrective proposal to the seller according to the terms of paragraph 13B. In 10 days, you have to do all these things. Get the inspector in, get the report back, decide with your buyer what they feel of, and you may need to guide them. What is important here that you may want to ask to have replaced, repaired, or credited, and get that back to the seller within 10 days. We will in depth talk about the confusion that there is on the time frame for this. It's very detailed. Agents with 20 years can't figure it out, okay? But we're gonna break it down next week and we're gonna go over that, okay? So I'll see you guys next week.
It's 2 weeks. It's not.
Okay.
So there's.
I think that's
Something else.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I told this guy tomorrow.
maybe now.
I think it's like 2 or so fire. Right. Yeah.
I think I waved to her, she was. Yeah. Oh, nice. Like, yeah.
It says on the bottom.
Okay, I didn't know that. With like square footage. Okay. I mean, my house perfectly is like 30 feet, but it's only 20 feet per floor. So I'm gonna be acting like remove the area back. I'll make sure like.